Hey everyone. Tonight, we're stepping into a story that may quietly rewrite everything you think you know about Christmas. Picture this. Thousands of years ago, long before the name Jesus Christ ever echoed through history, your ancestors stood together in the blackness of the longest night of the year. They were afraid, truly afraid. They had no certainty that the sun would return, no promise that spring would ever come back. All they had was fire, hope, and one another. And from that fear, from that deep human need to find light when the world felt darkest, Christmas was born. Just not in the way you've been told. Before we go any further, I'd really appreciate it if you took a moment to subscribe and tap the like button, but only if you genuinely enjoy spending this quiet time with me. And I'd love to know something about you. Where are you listening from right now? Are you already in bed? Sitting by a window? Maybe there's snow falling outside, or maybe you're somewhere warm. Leave a comment and tell me. I read every one, and it truly means a lot. Now, let's lower the lights, maybe turn on a fan or some soft background noise, and settle in with me. Because here's something rarely said out loud. The story of Christmas doesn't begin in a manger in Bethlehem. It begins much earlier. It begins with you, with me, with every human who has ever stared into winter and wondered, will I survive this? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine life 5,000 years ago. There's no electricity, no heater humming quietly at a perfect 72 degrees, no grocery store around the corner. When winter arrives, it arrives without mercy. The days grow shorter, and shorter, and shorter still, until the sun barely rises before slipping away again. Your ancestors, mine too, didn't have scientists explaining the winter solstice. They only had the cold, the darkness, and a terrifying question hanging in the air. What if the light never comes back? They had no understanding of the Earth's tilt on its axis. What they did understand was this: the sun, the very source of life, appeared to be fading, and they were utterly terrified that one day it might never return. Pause on that fear for a moment. Really sit with it. What would it feel like to believe the sun could simply stop rising, that darkness might last forever, that the cold would never loosen its grip? This wasn't a vague worry or an abstract idea. It was raw, existential terror at its most primitive level. No sun meant no harvest. No harvest meant no food. No food meant death. For everyone, the stakes could not have been higher. So they did what humans have always done when faced with forces they couldn't explain or control. They created rituals. They built hope. They turned fear into ceremony. In ancient Egypt, people celebrated the rebirth of Ra, the sun god. They filled their homes with green palm rushes, symbols of life triumphing over death. In China, festivals of light honored the return of longer days. The Hebrew people used evergreen branches in their winter rituals. But why evergreens? Have you ever stopped to ask that? Why did cultures separated by vast distances, Romans and Norse, Celts and Germanic tribes, all cling to the same symbol? Because in the heart of winter, when everything else has withered or fallen silent, evergreens remain green. They survive, they persist, they refuse to surrender. To ancestors shivering in endless darkness, that must have felt like magic. Like a promise, like proof that life could endure. The evergreen became a symbol of eternal life, of hope, of defiance against death itself. It was their way of saying, we see you, winter, we see your darkness, but you will not win. And here's where the story becomes even more compelling. Across the world, different cultures developed their own solstice traditions, yet they all shared strikingly similar elements. Fire, light, feasting, bringing greenery indoors, exchanging gifts, gathering together as a community. Why? Because these weren't just celebrations. They were survival strategies, practical ones and psychological ones. The feasting wasn't indulgence, it was a necessity. Livestock that couldn't be fed through winter had to be eaten. Better one great feast than watching your animals slowly starve. And the fires, yes, they provided warmth. But they meant something deeper. Fire was humanity's first technology, the thing that separated us from animals. When you light a fire on the darkest night of the year, you're doing more than creating heat and light. You're declaring dominance over nature itself. You're saying, I am human. I can create what the world has taken away. And gift giving? That strengthened social bonds at the exact moment when survival depended on one another the most. In the depths of winter, isolation meant death. You needed your neighbors. You needed your family. Gifts weren't just objects. They were investments in relationships that might save your life. And the coming together, the communal celebration, that was perhaps the most important part of all. Because when you're facing your deepest fears, you need to look around and see that you're not alone. You need to feast and laugh and sing and dance and remind yourself that yes, life is hard, but it's also worth living. Let me paint you a picture. It's December, thousands of years ago. You're part of a small tribe somewhere in Northern Europe. The sun has been disappearing for months now. The days are barely 3 hours long. Your food stores are running low. It's so cold that even the strongest among you are starting to wonder if you'll make it to spring. And then someone in your tribe, maybe the elder, maybe the wise woman, maybe the chief, announces that tonight is the longest night. Tonight the sun is at its weakest point, but starting tomorrow, the days will begin to grow longer again. The sun will start its journey back. Can you imagine the relief, the hope that must have flooded through that community? So tonight, you don't just sit in your hut worrying. You gather. You bring out whatever food you've been saving. You light the biggest fire you can manage. You bring in evergreen branches to decorate your space. You tell stories. You sing songs. You give small gifts to the people you love. You celebrate. You celebrate not because everything is fine. It's not. You celebrate because you're still here. You've made it this far. And maybe, just maybe, if you can make it through tonight, you can make it through tomorrow and the day after that until spring comes again. This is the spiritual DNA of Christmas. This is where it really begins. Not in Rome, not in Bethlehem, not in Victorian England, but in the human heart, in the face of darkness, choosing hope over despair. And here's what makes me emotional about this. We're still doing it. 4,000 years later, we're still gathering in December. We're still bringing evergreens into our homes. We're still lighting candles and fires and stringing up lights. We're still giving gifts to strengthen our bonds. We're still feasting together. We're still telling stories. The names have changed. The gods have changed. The specific traditions have evolved. But that core impulse, that refusal to let the darkness win, that commitment to creating light and warmth and connection in the coldest, darkest time, hasn't changed at all. You know what's really beautiful? Most people today put up a Christmas tree and never think about why. They string lights on their house and never wonder where that impulse came from. But now you know. Now you understand that when you decorate an evergreen tree, you're participating in a ritual that goes back to the very beginning of human civilization. You're doing what your ancestors did, bringing life and light into the darkness. The ancient Romans had a saying, Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. Because no matter how dark it got, no matter how long the night, the sun always came back, never gave up. It was invincible. And in a way, that's what we celebrate every December. Not just a baby in a manger, though for many that's deeply meaningful, but something even older and more universal, the unconquerable human spirit. Our refusal to give up, our insistence on creating light even in the darkest times. Think about your own life for a moment. Think about the dark times you've been through, the winters of your soul, the moments when you didn't know if you'd make it through. And yet here you are, still standing, still fighting, still showing up day after day. That's the real miracle of the winter solstice. That's the real meaning behind all these ancient celebrations. It's not about any one religion or tradition. It's about the eternal human capacity for hope, for resilience, for coming together when times are hard and saying, we will survive this together. So when people argue about the real meaning of Christmas, or whether it's pagan or Christian, they're missing the point. The real meaning of Christmas is buried so deep in human history that it transcends any single religion or culture. It's in our bones. It's in our collective memory. It's that ancient instinct that tells us when the world is dark and cold. Gather your people, light a fire, and hold on to hope. Our ancestors faced the longest night with nothing but fire, faith, and each other. And they survived. They passed on life. They passed on hope generation after generation through ice ages and plagues and wars and famines. They kept the light alive. They kept choosing life over death, hope over despair, connection over isolation. And because they did, you're here tonight listening to this story. You're the proof that their hope was justified. You're the living answer to their ancient prayer. Please let the sun come back. Please let life continue. Every December, whether we realize it or not, we honor them. We honor that unbroken chain of human resilience stretching back thousands of years. We honor everyone who ever faced the darkness and refused to give in. That's where Christmas really begins. In the darkness, in the cold, in the fear, and in the absolutely stunning human capacity to create light. Anyway, now you might be wondering, how did we get from these ancient pagan celebrations to the Christmas we know today? How did evergreen branches become Christmas trees? How did the winter solstice become December 25th? How did ancient fire festivals become a holiday about a baby born in Bethlehem? Well, that's where things get really interesting, because the journey from those ancient fires to your Christmas morning, it's filled with twists and turns you never expected. It involves Roman orgies, Viking warriors, Puritan killjoys, and a certain German monk who may or may not have invented the Christmas tree. But that transformation didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, culture by culture, century by century. And the next stop on our journey takes us to the heart of the most powerful empire the world has ever seen. Ancient Rome, where every December they threw a party so wild, so excessive, so absolutely bonkers that it makes your office Christmas party look like a church service. It was called Saturnalia, and trust me, you need to hear this story. Picture this. It's December 17th, somewhere around 50 BC. You're walking through the streets of Rome, the greatest city in the world, and what you see would absolutely blow your mind. The entire city has gone insane, and I mean that in the best possible way. Slaves are wearing their masters' clothes. Masters are serving dinner to their slaves. The courts are closed. The schools are empty. Nobody's working. Instead, they're gambling in the streets, which is normally illegal. But not this week. People are drunk everywhere. At 10 in the morning, they're singing at the top of their lungs. They're wearing these bright, colorful outfits called synthesis instead of their normal togas. Every home is decorated with wreaths and greenery. And in the middle of it all, someone just set up a tree in the public square, covered it with gifts, and people are dancing around it like it's the greatest thing they've ever seen. Welcome to Saturnalia, the festival that would eventually become, well, a big part of your Christmas. Now, before we go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever been to a party that got so out of hand that someone had to build a soundproof room just to escape it? Because that actually happened. The Roman writer Pliny the Younger, we're talking about a real historical figure here, he literally built a soundproof study in his house because Saturnalia was so loud, so chaotic, so absolutely uncontrollable that he couldn't get any work done. Can you imagine? The parties were so wild that they drove one of Rome's most famous intellectuals to architectural extremes. But here's what I find fascinating. Saturnalia wasn't just some random excuse to party. It had deep meaning. It was sacred. It was profound. And it was also, yes, completely bonkers. Let me tell you the story. Saturnalia was originally a single day, December 17th, dedicated to Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture. Now, Saturn wasn't just any god. He represented something the Romans longed for. A mythical golden age when gods and humans lived together in perfect harmony. A time when there were no slaves, no classes, no inequality. Everyone was equal. Everyone was happy. The earth gave up its abundance freely without anyone having to work for it. Of course, that golden age was long gone by the time the Roman Empire was at its peak. Rome ran on slavery. It ran on brutal inequality. It ran on conquest and oppression. But for 1 week every year, the Romans did something extraordinary. They pretended that the golden age had returned. During Saturnalia, everything turned upside down. Social roles reversed. Masters waited on their slaves at dinner, actually served them food, poured their wine, cleaned up after them. Now, let's be clear. This didn't mean slaves were suddenly free. They still had to cook the meal for one thing. But for a few days, the normal order of things was suspended. And you know what's wild? The slaves could say anything they wanted. They could insult their masters. They could mock them. They could tell jokes at their expense. And the masters had to take it because that was the rule of Saturnalia. Why would the Romans do this? Why would the most powerful people in the most powerful empire in the world voluntarily give up their power even temporarily. Some historians think it was a pressure release valve. If you're going to maintain a brutal hierarchical society built on slavery and inequality, you need to let people blow off steam sometimes. Give them 1 week a year where they can taste freedom, where they can mock the system, where they can imagine something different. Then when it's over, they'll go back to accepting their place. But I think there's something deeper going on. I think the Romans, at least some of them, genuinely believed in the idea of that golden age. They genuinely wanted for just a moment to experience what it might feel like to live in a world where everyone was equal, where everyone was happy, where the abundance of life was shared freely. It was a dream, a beautiful, impossible dream. And for 7 days, every December, they made that dream real. Here's how it worked. Saturnalia started on December 17th, and by the late Republic had expanded to a full week of festivities. It kicked off with a public sacrifice at the Temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum. Now this temple was special. Inside it, Saturn's statue was normally bound with wool and chains. But on the first day of Saturnalia, they'd remove those chains, symbolically releasing the god and releasing everyone from their normal obligations. After the sacrifice, there was a public banquet. And I mean public, anyone could come. Rich, poor, citizen, slave, everyone feasted together. The Roman state provided the food. Can you imagine the logistics of that? Feeding thousands of people in the Forum. It must have been chaos. Beautiful, delicious chaos. Then people went home to celebrate with their families and friends. And this is where things got really interesting. Each household would choose a king of Saturnalia by drawing lots or rolling dice. This person could be anyone, could even be a slave, would become the temporary ruler of the household. They'd wear a funny hat, sit at the head of the table, and give ridiculous orders that everyone had to follow. Sing me a song? Do a dance? Tell me your most embarrassing secret. It was silly. It was playful. It was a way of saying, you know what? All this hierarchy, all these social rules we take so seriously the rest of the year. It's kind of arbitrary, isn't it? But the heart of Saturnalia was the gift-giving. Romans gave each other wax candles called ciri. Do you know why? Because Saturnalia fell right around the winter solstice, the darkest time of the year. The candles represented light returning. The sun is coming back. Hope in the darkness. Sound familiar? On the last day of the festival, called Sigillularia, people exchanged small terracotta figurines called sigillaria. These little clay dolls might have originally been substitutes for human sacrifices. Yes, let that sink in. But by Roman times, they were just cute gifts, like the ancient Roman equivalent of stocking stuffers. But people also gave more elaborate gifts. Martial, a Roman poet, wrote these witty little poems about Saturnalia gifts. Fancy writing tablets, dice for gambling, elegant toothpicks, yes, really, bottles of wine, warm clothes, books. The point wasn't the value of the gift. The point was the gesture, the connection, the reminder that you mattered to someone. Now, the Roman poet Culus called Saturnalia the best of days. He loved it. I absolutely loved it. But not everyone felt that way. Some Romans found the whole thing embarrassing. The great philosopher Seneca complained that during Saturnalia, the whole mob has let itself go in pleasures. He tried to avoid the festivities to stay home and be serious and philosophical. But even he admitted it was basically impossible. The celebration was everywhere. You couldn't escape it. And then there's my favorite historical detail. The Roman Emperor Caligula, yes, that Caligulus, the notoriously unstable one, tried to limit Saturnalia to just 5 days instead of 7. Can you guess how well that went? The people basically ignored him. They party for 7 days anyway, because apparently there are some things even an emperor can't control. Later, the emperor's mission tried a different approach. Instead of limiting Saturnalia, he tried to control it. He'd host these massive public banquets in the Colosseum with entertainment and free food and games. The poet Statius described one of these events. The mission had sweets, fruits, and nuts raining down on the crowd from above. He released flights of flamingos, actual flamingos, to fly over Rome. He had fighting dwarves and female gladiators perform, illuminated by torchlight for the first time in history. It was spectacular. It was excessive. It was propaganda. Domitian was basically saying, you want Saturnalia? I'll give you Saturnalia, but we're doing it my way under my control. But here's the thing about Saturnalia. It was bigger than any emperor. It belonged to the people. Every household celebrated in their own way. Every family had their own traditions, and that's what made it powerful. Think about what was really happening here. For 1 week, Rome, this massive militaristic empire built on conquest and slavery, transformed into something else, something warmer, something more human. People sang in the streets, they played games, they told jokes, they forgave grudges. They visited friends they hadn't seen all year. They strengthened the bonds that held their communities together. Does this sound familiar to you? Because it should. The decorated greenery, the gift-giving, the feasting, the emphasis on family and friendship, the suspension of normal rules, the feeling that this time is special, sacred, set apart from ordinary life. You're doing all of these things every December. You've just swapped Saturn for Santa. But here's where the story gets really interesting. By the 4th century AD, something new was happening in Rome. Christianity was spreading, and the Christian church had a problem. Their followers were still celebrating Saturnalia. Even devout Christians found it almost impossible to resist. The festival was too fun, too meaningful, too deeply woven into the fabric of Roman life. But Saturnalia was dedicated to a pagan god. It was fundamentally incompatible with Christian teaching. So what did the church do? Well, we'll get to that. But first, you need to understand that Saturnalia wasn't the only winter festival happening in the Roman world. There was also a newer celebration, one that would complicate the Christmas story even more. Sol Invictus, the birthday of the unconquered sun, celebrated on December the 25th. And then there were the people up north, the Germanic tribes, the Norse, the Celts, who had their own winter traditions, wild, fierce traditions involving massive bonfires, sacred trees, and enough meat to drown a Viking long ship. All of these celebrations, all of these traditions were about to collide. And from that collision, something entirely new would emerge. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, in the streets of Rome, Saturnalia is in full swing. The candles are lit, the gifts are being exchanged. Someone's slave just told them a joke that would normally get them whipped. And everyone's laughing instead. The golden age has returned, at least for today. And somewhere in that crowd, maybe there's a Christian family quietly going to church on December 25th to celebrate something different, something new. The birth of a baby who would, they believed, bring a different kind of golden age, not a temporary reversal of roles, but a complete transformation of the world. They're not trying to replace Saturnia. Not yet. They're just adding something to it. A new layer of meaning, a new story to tell. And slowly, very slowly, those two stories, the story of Saturn's golden age and the story of a baby in a manger, would begin to merge. The candles of Saturnalia would become the lights of Christmas. The gifts would remain. The feasting would remain. The emphasis on family and community would remain. But the meaning, the deepest meaning, would shift. And that shift would echo through history, shaping the holiday we celebrate today. So the next time you light a Christmas candle, remember you're doing what the Romans did. You're pushing back against the darkness. You're asserting that light will return, that hope is justified, that joy is possible even in the darkest times. The names have changed, the gods have changed, but that impulse, that refusal to let winter win, that's eternal. That's human. That's what connects you to every single person who ever celebrated Saturnalia in the streets of Rome. Now, while the Romans were partying in their togas and the Christians were quietly gathering in their churches, something very different was happening in the frozen north. The Vikings, the Celts, the Germanic tribes, they had their own way of confronting winter. And let me tell you, it was fierce, it was beautiful, and it involved a lot more fire than you'd think was strictly necessary. Far from the marble temples and crowded streets of Rome, in the dark forests of Scandinavia, a completely different kind of winter celebration was taking shape. And I have to tell you, it was wild in a way that makes Saturnia look like a tea party. The Norse people called it Ule. And if you think your family's Christmas traditions are intense, wait until you hear what the Vikings were up to. Imagine it's late December somewhere in Norway, around the year 900. The sun hasn't fully risen in weeks. You're living in near total darkness. The cold is so brutal, it can kill you if you're not careful. Your livestock are huddled in the barn attached to your long house. Your food stores are everything standing between you and starvation. And what do you do in this situation? You throw the biggest, loudest, most defiant party humanly possible for 12 straight days. Because if you're going to face down the darkness, the cold, and the very real possibility of death, you might as well do it with a massive fire, endless food, and enough me to make everyone forget they're terrified. This was Uli, and here's what makes it so fascinating. Nearly everything you do at Christmas today, the things you think are Christian traditions, actually came from these fierce Norse warriors and their winter celebration. Let me walk you through it, because once you hear this, you'll never look at Christmas the same way again. Ule began on the night of the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. But the Norse didn't just call it the solstice. They had a much more evocative name for it. Mother's Night, Modra Night. Mother's Night was sacred. It was about honoring the women of the family. Yes, but it was deeper than that. It was about honoring the divine feminine energy itself. The Mother Earth who gives life, who births the spring, who nurtures all things. In the dead of winter, when everything seems dead, the Norse people gathered to remember life comes from mothers. The earth is a mother, and she will give birth to spring again, just as she always has. How beautiful is that? In their darkest hour, they honored the power of creation itself. On Mother's Night, families would gather together, light enormous bonfires, and begin the celebration. And when I say enormous bonfires, I mean it. The Norse weren't messing around with a few logs in a fireplace. We're talking bonfires so large they could be seen for miles. Bonfires that seem to challenge the darkness itself. You think you can overwhelm us? Watch this. These weren't just practical fires for warmth. They were spiritual statements. They were acts of defiance. They were humanity's middle finger to winter. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Do you know where the tradition of the rule log comes from? Right here. The Norse would select a massive piece of timber, sometimes an entire tree trunk, and they'd bring it into their long house on Christmas Eve. Well, on the eve of Ule, technically, they'd light it, and it would burn continuously for all 12 days of the celebration. 12 days, one log. Think about the symbolism of that for a second. While the sun was at its weakest, while the darkness was at its peak, you kept a fire burning in your home without interruption. You maintained light and warmth through the entire vulnerable period. You refused to let the flame go out. That rule log you might put on your TV screen or in your fireplace for ambiance at Christmas. That's not just decoration, that's an ancient promise. The light will not go out. We will not surrender to the darkness. But the rule log was just the beginning. The Norse also brought trees into their homes and decorated them. Now, these weren't quite like our Christmas trees. They didn't stand them up in the corner with ornaments. Instead, they'd place evergreen branches throughout the house, hang them from the rafters, and weave them into wreaths. Why evergreens? For the same reason the Romans did it. For the same reason the ancient Egyptians did it. Because in the death of winter, evergreens stay alive. They're proof that life endures, that not everything succumbs to the cold. And here's something you probably didn't know. The Norse believed that evergreens had protective powers. They thought hanging evergreen branches would keep evil spirits away and would protect the household from malevolent forces that were particularly active during the dark time of year. So decorating with evergreens wasn't just pretty, it was spiritual protection. Are you starting to see the pattern? Almost everything you do at Christmas has roots that go back thousands of years to people who were trying to survive winter in the most inhospitable places on Earth. Now, let's talk about the feasting. Because the Norse didn't just eat during Uli, they feasted like tomorrow might never come, which, to be fair, it might not have. The centerpiece of the Uli feast was the Ula ham. But this wasn't just any ham, it was a boar. Specifically, a wild boar sacrificed to Freyr, the god of fertility, harvest, and prosperity. The boar was sacred to Freya. By eating it during rule, the Norse people were literally consuming the god's power, his blessing, his promise of future abundance. You know that Christmas ham a lot of families eat? That's not a random tradition. That's a 4,000-year-old echo of Viking ritual sacrifice. You're welcome for that delightful dinner conversation starter. But here's what really gets me. The 12 days of Uli weren't just about partying. Each day had meaning. Each day was dedicated to something specific. After the winter solstice, after the shortest day had passed and the days started getting longer again, the focus shifted. The second day of Uli was about celebrating the return of the light. It was about acknowledging we made it. The sun is coming back. We're going to survive. This is why people started hanging lights during winter celebrations. Not just for beauty, though they are beautiful, but as a declaration, as a reminder, as hope made visible. The following 9 days were each dedicated to a virtue that the Norse people believed was essential for survival. And I want you to really hear this list because it's stunning. Day 3, courage, because facing winter required bravery. Day 4, truth, because you couldn't afford lies when survival was at stake. Day 5, honor, because your reputation was everything in a tight-knit community. Day 6, fidelity, because loyalty held communities together. Day 7, hospitality, because the person you sheltered might save your life next winter. Day 8, discipline, because laziness in winter could kill everyone. Day 9, industriousness, because hard work was the only thing between you and starvation. Day 10, self-reliance, because you couldn't always depend on others. Day 11, perseverance, because giving up meant death. 9 virtues, 9 days, a complete philosophy of how to survive and thrive in the harshest conditions imaginable. Can you imagine if we brought this back? If instead of just exchanging gifts and eating too much, we dedicated each day of Christmas to embodying a different virtue? What would that do to us, to our families, to our communities? The Norse understood something we've forgotten. Winter isn't just a season, it's a test, it's a challenge. And the way you meet that challenge, the virtues you embody, the community you build, the hope you maintain, that determines whether you make it to spring. But wait, there's more. Because the 4th night of Yule was called Children's Night. And this is where the gift-giving tradition really took root. On Children's Night, Norse families would give presents to the younger generation. Not because it was someone's birthday, not because the children had been good or bad, but because children represented the future. They were the ones who would carry on the family, the community, the culture. In the darkest time of year, you invested in the future by celebrating the young. Does this sound familiar? Because this is where Santa Claus starts to emerge. Not in the form we know him now, we'll get to that later, but the idea that winter is a time to give gifts to children, to celebrate them, to invest in the next generation. That started here in the frozen north 1,000 years ago. The Norse also had this beautiful tradition of going around to neighbors' houses during Yule, singing songs, telling stories, sharing food and drink. They called it going a thing. Communities would move from house to house, strengthening bonds, checking on people who might be isolated, making sure everyone was okay. Sounds like caroling to you? Because it should. Here's what moves me about Norse Ule celebrations. They weren't about escaping winter. They were about facing it directly with courage and community and defiant joy. They didn't pretend it wasn't cold. They didn't pretend they weren't scared. They acknowledged the darkness. And then they lit the biggest fires they could, gathered everyone they loved, and celebrated life. Anyway, that's not just a survival strategy. That's a spiritual practice. That's wisdom. The Norse had a phrase, "He shall rise early who wants another's life or goods." Basically, if you want to survive winter, get up early and work hard. But they also knew that work alone wasn't enough. You needed community, you needed ritual, you needed meaning. So they created Yule, 12 days of eating, drinking, singing, storytelling, gift-giving, and virtue-building. 12 days of refusing to let winter break them. And when Christian missionaries eventually made their way to Scandinavia, they found these Ule celebrations already deeply embedded in the culture. The timing was perfect. Late December, right around the winter solstice, the themes were perfect. Light overcoming darkness, hope and despair, community and isolation. The missionaries were smart. Instead of trying to stamp out the rule, they merged it with Christmas. They kept the 12 days. They kept the feasting. They kept the gift-giving. They kept the evergreen decorations. They kept the Ule log. They kept almost everything. They just gave it all new meaning. The 12 days of Ule became the 12 days of Christmas. The The celebration of the sun's return became the celebration of the sun's birth. The rule log became a symbol of Christ's light. The evergreens became symbols of eternal life through Jesus. It was brilliant, it was pragmatic, and it's why your Christmas today looks the way it does. When you hang lights on your house, you're doing what the Norse did, declaring that light will overcome darkness. When you bring an evergreen tree into your home, you're doing what they did, bringing life into the dead of winter. When you give gifts to children, you're honoring what they honored. The future, the next generation, the continuity of life. You are a Viking every December. You just don't know it. And here's the thing that really gets me. The Norse eventually converted to Christianity. Their pagan gods faded away. Their old stories became legends. But Ula Yule didn't die. It transformed. It evolved. It merged with other traditions and became something new. Because the human need that you'll address, the need to find light in darkness, hope in despair, community in isolation, that need is eternal. That need transcends any particular religion or culture. That need is what makes us human. So whether you're Christian or pagan or atheist or anything else, when you celebrate Christmas, you're participating in something ancient and profound. You're doing what humans have always done when faced with winter's darkness. You're gathering your people, lighting your fires, and choosing hope. The names change, the stories change, but that core impulse remains. Now, while the Norse were burning their rule logs in Scandinavia and the Romans were partying during Saturnalia in the Mediterranean, the early Christians were quietly developing their own celebration. And they had a problem. They needed to figure out when to celebrate Jesus' birth. The Bible didn't give them a date. Historical records didn't help. So, they had to make a choice. And that choice, the choice to celebrate on December 25th, was more complicated, more controversial, and more interesting than you've ever been told. Because despite what you've heard, Constantine didn't just pick a random pagan holiday and slap Jesus' name on it. The truth is much stranger than that. So here's a question that's probably never kept you awake at night, but maybe it should. Why December 25th? I mean, really think about it. The Bible doesn't mention the date. Matthew and Luke tell the story of Jesus' birth, but neither one says, and lo, it was December 25th. In fact, based on the details they do give, shepherds watching their flocks in the fields at night. Most biblical scholars agree, Jesus probably wasn't born in winter at all. Shepherds didn't keep their flocks outside overnight during the cold, rainy Palestinian winter. They would have brought them in, so Jesus was more likely born in spring or early fall. So if it's not the actual birth date, why December 25th? Here's what you've probably heard. The early Christians just stole the date from the pagans. They saw Saturnalia happening, saw the birthday of Sol Invictus on December 25th, and thought, hey, everyone's already celebrating. Let's just hijack this date and make it about Jesus instead. It's a neat story. It makes sense, and it's what most people believe. There's just one problem. It's probably not true. I know. I just spent the last hour telling you about pagan winter festivals and how Christmas absorbed all their traditions. So how can I now say December 25th wasn't chosen because of paganism? Because history is complicated, and the truth is so much more interesting than the myth. Let me tell you a story that most people have never heard. A story about a Christian theologian named Sextus Julius Africanus who lived in North Africa in the early 3rd century around the year 220 AD. Africanus was obsessed with dates. He wanted to figure out the chronology of biblical events to create a timeline of salvation history. And he did something fascinating. He calculated that Jesus was conceived on March 25th. Now, why March 25th? Because Africanus believed, as many early Christians did, that the most important events in Jesus' life happened on the same date. He believed Jesus died on March 25th. And following ancient Jewish traditions about righteous men, he believed Jesus must have been conceived on the same date he died. I know that sounds strange to modern ears, but there was real theological reasoning behind it. The idea was that great prophets and righteous men experienced what was called integral age. They lived in perfect, complete years. They were conceived and died on the same date, making their existence cosmically symmetrical, somehow perfect in the divine plan. So if Jesus was conceived on March 25th, count forward 9 months. Where does that get you? December 25th. This is called the calculation theory. And here's what's absolutely crucial. Africanus wrote about this around 220 AD, more than 50 years before Emperor Aurelian even created the festival of Sol Invictus in 274 AD. Let that sink in for a moment. Christians were celebrating Jesus' birth on December 25th before the Romans had a sun god festival on that date. The conventional story has it backwards. Now I can see you thinking, but wait, what about Saturnalia? That was happening way before Christianity. And you're absolutely right. Saturnalia was ancient. But here's the thing. Saturnalia didn't happen on December 25th. It started on December 17th and ran for about a week. The climax of Santelia moved around over the centuries, sometimes falling on December 25th, sometimes not. It wasn't fixed to that specific date, the way Christmas eventually became. So where does this myth come from? Why does everyone believe Christians stole December the 25th from pagans? The earliest known source for that claim comes from the 12th century. The 12th century from a Syrian bishop named Dionysius Bar Kalib. He's the first person we know of who suggested that the church chose December 25th to compete with Sol Invictus, but he was writing more than 800 years after the fact with no earlier sources to back him up. Then during the Enlightenment period in the 17th and 18th centuries, scholars who were often skeptical of Christianity loved this idea. It fit their narrative that Christianity wasn't really original, that it just copied from earlier religions. And once a few influential scholars repeated the claim, it became accepted wisdom. It's in textbooks, it's on Wikipedia, everyone knows it's true, except the historical evidence doesn't actually support it. Here's what we do know. The earliest documented celebration of Christmas on December 25th comes from North Africa, from Christian communities in the second half of the 3rd century, before Constantine, before Christianity was legal, during a time when Christians were being persecuted and were extremely careful to distance themselves from pagan practices. The church father Origen, writing around 245 AD, actually mocked Romans for celebrating birthdays at all. He thought birthday celebrations were a pagan custom that Christians should avoid. So it seems pretty unlikely that these same Christians would deliberately choose a pagan festival date for Jesus' birth. And here's another fascinating detail. In the Eastern Church, they celebrated Jesus' birth on January 6th, not December 25th. Still do, in fact. That's why Eastern Orthodox Christmas is on a different date. If the Western Church was just trying to co-opt a pagan festival, why didn't the Eastern Church do the same thing? They had their own winter festivals they could have hijacked, but they chose January 6th instead, based on their own theological calculations. Two different parts of the Christian world calculating independently came up with two different dates, both in late December or early January, both around the winter solstice, but neither one simply copying a pagan festival. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Remember Augustine, the great theologian from North Africa, writing around 400 AD. He mentions a group of Christians called the Donatists who'd been celebrating Christmas on December 25th since at least 312 AD, possibly earlier. And Augustine explains their reasoning. They believe Jesus was conceived on March 25th, so he must have been born 9 months later on December 25th. Same reasoning as Africanus, same calculation. But now we have confirmation that this wasn't just one theologian's theory. This was how early Christians actually determined the date. Augustine even writes, "For he is believed to have been conceived on the 25th of March, upon which day also he suffered. So the womb of the Virgin in which he was conceived, where no one of mortals was begotten, corresponds to the new grave in which he was buried, wherein was never man laid, neither before him nor since." Do you hear what he's saying? The symmetry wasn't arbitrary. It was deeply symbolic. The womb and the tomb, conception and death, the beginning and the end, it all had to align, had to mirror each other, because that's how divine perfection was understood. This is beautiful theology. Whether you believe it or not, you have to admit it's beautiful, and it had nothing to do with stealing from pagans. So what about Sol Invictus? What about the Aurelian Sun Festival on December 25th? Well, Here's a theory that most historians don't like to talk about because it contradicts the conventional narrative. Maybe the pagans were copying the Christians. Think about it. By 274 AD, when Aurelian created the Sol Invictus festival, Christianity was already a significant presence in the Roman Empire. There were Christian communities all over, and many of them were already celebrating Jesus' birth on December 25th. Aurelian was trying to create a universal religion for the Roman Empire, a sun cult that could unite all the various pagan traditions. He needed a date for his son's birthday. What better date than December 25th, right after the winter solstice, when the days visibly start getting longer? But it's entirely possible he chose that date in part because Christians were already celebrating something important then. He might have been trying to compete with Christianity to offer a pagan alternative to this growing Christian festival. In other words, Sol Invictus might be copying Christmas, not the other way around. Now, I'm not saying this is definitely what happened. The historical record is incomplete. We don't have all the evidence we'd need to say for certain, but it's at least as plausible as the conventional story, and it's supported by earlier sources. Here's what we can say with confidence. December 25th was not randomly chosen. It was not a cynical attempt to trick pagans into becoming Christians. It was the result of serious theological reflection by early Christians trying to understand the chronology of Jesus' life. Whether they were right or wrong about March 25th being the date of conception and death, well, that's a different question. But they genuinely believed it. They had reasons for believing it. And their conclusion, December 25th for Jesus' birth, came from that belief, not from looking at a pagan festival calendar. So why does the myth persist? Why do we all believe Christians stole Christmas from the pagans? I think it's because the myth is simpler. It's easier to understand. Christians copied pagans is a straightforward narrative that doesn't require you to understand ancient Jewish traditions about integral ages or the theological significance of conception and death dates aligning. And honestly, the myth is kind of fun. It makes Christmas feel more exotic, more mysterious, more connected to ancient times. Christmas is actually a pagan holiday. Sounds way more interesting at a dinner party than Christians chose December 25th based on complex theological calculations about Jesus' conception date. But here's the thing. The truth is actually more interesting. Because what really happened, what we can document historically, is that Christianity and paganism existed side by side for centuries. They influenced each other. They borrowed from each other, not in a simple one-directional way, but in a complex dance of cultural exchange. Yes, Christians eventually absorbed many pagan traditions, the evergreen decorations, the gift-giving, the feasting, the celebration itself. We talked about that in the previous sections. But the date, the actual date of December 25th, seems to have come from internal Christian reasoning, not from external pagan influence. And then, here's the beautiful irony. Once Christianity became dominant, once Constantine converted and the church gained power, then the church did start deliberately aligning Christian festivals with pagan ones. Not to trick people, but to ease the transition, to give converts something familiar to hold on to as they moved from their old religion to the new one. By the time Pope Julius I officially declared December 25th as Christmas in the 4th century, Saturnalia was already winding down. Sol Invictus was losing popularity, but there were still plenty of people celebrating winter festivals. Plenty of cultural momentum around late December as a time of celebration. So the church said in effect, okay, keep celebrating, keep your festivals, keep your traditions, just redirect them. Instead of celebrating Saturn or the sun, celebrate the sun. Instead of marking the solstice, mark the birth of Jesus. Same time, same basic activities, new meaning. This wasn't deception. This was called baptizing pagan culture. Taking what was already there and infusing it with Christian significance. And it worked. It worked incredibly well. So well that here we are 2,000 years later, and most of the Western world celebrates December 25th as Christmas, whether they're Christian or not. But the date itself came from Christians trying to work out their own theology, trying to understand their own story. The pagan influences came later in the form of traditions and customs and ways of celebrating, not in choosing when to celebrate, Does this change anything? Does it matter whether December 25th came from theological calculation or pagan borrowing? Maybe not. Maybe Christmas means what it means to you, regardless of its origins. But I think it's worth knowing the truth. Worth understanding that history is messier and more complicated than we're usually told. It is worth appreciating that both things can be true. Christmas can have originated from Christian theological reflection and absorbed countless pagan traditions over the centuries. It's not either or. It's both and. And honestly, that makes Christmas more beautiful, not less. It makes it a genuine meeting point of cultures, of traditions, of different ways of marking the darkest time of year and celebrating hope. It makes it truly universal. Not because one culture conquered another and imposed its holiday, but because humans from different cultures, different religions, different times, all recognize the same need and met it in remarkably similar ways. We need light in the darkness. We need hope in winter. We need a community in isolation. We need to mark the turning point, the moment when the days start getting longer again, when spring becomes possible again. The ancient pagans knew this, the early Christians knew this, the Vikings knew this, and we know it too, even if we've forgotten why. So December 25th is not Jesus' actual birthday. It's probably not even close. But it's the date that early Christians thinking deeply about their faith decided made the most sense symbolically and theologically. And then over centuries, it accumulated layer upon layer of meaning, tradition, and cultural significance. That's not theft. That's not borrowing. That's evolution. That's what culture does. It grows, it adapts, it incorporates new elements while maintaining its core. And the core of Christmas, whether you approach it from a Christian perspective or a cultural one, is about light overcoming darkness, hope prevailing over despair, life persisting through death. The promise that winter will not last forever. That message is older than Christianity. It's older than Rome. It's older than writing. It's as old as humanity itself. And every year, on December 25th or January 6th, or whenever you celebrate, we tell that story again with different words, different symbols, different traditions, but always the same essential truth. Light returns, life endures. We will survive this darkness together. Now, choosing December 25th was one thing, but making it actually stick, making Christmas into a universal celebration that even Roman emperors had to acknowledge. That required a very different kind of power. That required one man, one emperor, whose conversion to Christianity would change everything, not just for Christmas, but for the entire Western world. His name was Constantine, and his relationship with Christmas is nothing like what you've been told. October 27th, 312 AD, the banks of the Tiber River, just outside Rome. A man named Constantine stands with his army about to fight the most important battle of his life. If he wins, he becomes sole emperor of the Western Roman Empire. If he loses, he dies. And according to the historian Eusebius, who knew Constantine personally, something extraordinary happened the day before this battle. Constantine looked up at the noon sky and saw a vision, a cross of light superimposed on the sun with words written in Latin in hawk sign vinces. In this sign, you will conquer. That night, Constantine had a dream. Christ himself appeared and told him to put the Christian symbol, the Kiro, the first two letters as Christ's name in Greek, on his soldiers' shields. Constantine did. His army won, and the course of Western civilization changed forever. Now, was this a genuine religious experience, a calculated political move, a convenient story invented after the fact? Historians have been arguing about this for 1700 years. We'll probably never know for sure. But here's what we do know. Constantine's conversion, whether sincere or strategic, transformed Christianity from a persecuted minority religion into the dominant faith of the Roman Empire. And in the process, it completely changed Christmas, but not in the way you think. See, here's the popular story. Constantine, the first Christian emperor, looked at all these pagan winter festivals, Satania, Sol Invictus, Uli, and said, hey, let's just make all of this about Jesus instead. December 25th, that's Christmas now. All your pagan traditions, they're Christian now. Problem solved. It's a tidy narrative. Constantine, as the great Christmas creator, deliberately syncretizing pagan and Christian traditions to make his empire easier to govern. There's just one problem. Constantine himself had almost nothing to do with Christmas. I know after all that buildup, but stay with me, because what actually happened is so much more fascinating than the myth. First, let's establish what Constantine did and didn't do. In 313 AD, the year after his victory at the Milvian Bridge, Constantine and his co-emperor Linnaeus issued the Edict of Milan. This decree granted religious tolerance to Christians throughout the Roman Empire. It ended centuries of persecution. It allowed Christians to worship openly, to build churches, and to own property. This was huge. This changed everything. But notice what it didn't do. It didn't make Christianity the official religion of the empire. It didn't ban pagan religions. It established tolerance, not dominance. Constantine personally favored Christianity. Yes, he built churches. He convened the Council of Nika in 325 AD to settle theological disputes. He eventually got baptized, though interestingly, not until he was on his deathbed in 337 AD. But he never completely abandoned his pagan roots. Here's something most people don't know. Constantine continued to use pagan imagery on his coins throughout his reign. The sun god Sol Invictus appeared on Constantine's coinage well into the 320s. Why? Because Constantine grew up in the Sol Invictus cult. His father was a deity of the unconquered sun. That imagery, that symbolism, was deeply embedded in how Romans understood imperial power. Constantine was navigating between two worlds, the pagan world he grew up in and the Christian world he was helping to create. And he did it carefully, pragmatically, sometimes inconsistently. So what about Christmas? What role did Constantine play in establishing December 25th as the date? Basically none. Remember what we discussed earlier? Christians in North Africa were celebrating Jesus' birth on December 25th before Constantine ever came to power. The date was already established in parts of the Christian community. Constantine didn't choose it, he didn't decree it, he didn't Christianize any pagan festival. In fact, we have no record of Constantine ever celebrating Christmas at all. No speeches about it, no laws about it, no indication that he personally cared about the date of Jesus' birth one way or another. The official canonization of December 25th as Christmas came later during the reign of Pope Julius III, or probably around 350 AD after Constantine's death, and even then it wasn't universally accepted immediately. The Eastern Church kept celebrating on January 6th. Some Christians remained suspicious of birthday celebrations altogether. So if Constantine didn't create Christmas, what did he do? He created the conditions that allowed Christianity and paganism to coexist, to intermingle, to slowly merge over centuries. And that's actually more important than any single decree about December 25th could have been. Think about what the Roman Empire looked like in the early 4th century. You had Christians, yes, but they were still a minority, maybe 10 to 15% of the population, though that's debated. The vast majority of Romans were still pagans, still celebrating Santalia, still worshipping the old gods. Constantine couldn't just flip a switch and make everyone Christian overnight. Even if he'd wanted to, which he probably didn't, it would have been impossible. You can't force genuine religious conversion. You can't make people stop believing what they've always believed just because an emperor says so. So what happened instead was a long, messy, complicated process of cultural negotiation. Christians and pagans living side by side, Christian bishops strategizing about how to spread their faith. Pagan festivals continue, but gradually are given Christian interpretations, old traditions persisting but with new meanings attached. And Christmas was right in the middle of this process. Here's a perfect example of how this worked. In 601 AD, almost 300 years after Constantine, Pope Gregory the Great wrote a letter to a missionary named Mellitus, who was heading to England. And in this letter, Gregory laid out an explicit strategy for Christianizing pagan cultures. He wrote, "The temples of the idols should on no account be destroyed. The idols are to be destroyed, but the temples themselves are to be dispersed with holy water, altars set up in them, and relics deposited there. In this way, we hope that the people, seeing that their temples are not destroyed, may abandon their error, and flocking more readily to their accustomed resorts, may come to know and adore the true God." Do you hear what he's saying? Don't destroy pagan temples. Turn them into churches. Don't ban pagan festivals. Give them Christian meanings. Make the transition as smooth as possible. Let people keep what's familiar while gradually shifting what it means. This wasn't Constantine's invention, but it was made possible by the world Constantine created. A world where Christianity had enough power to influence culture, but not so much power that it could simply erase everything that came before. And this strategy, this deliberate, gradual Christianization of pagan culture, is what shaped Christmas over the following centuries. The evergreen decorations the Romans used during Santelia, Christians kept them but reinterpreted them as symbols of eternal life through Christ. The gift-giving kept it, but connected it to the gifts of the Magi. The feasting kept it, but made it about celebrating Jesus' birth. The winter solstice timing kept it, but made it about the sun rising, not the sun rising. Same practices, new meanings. This is what scholars call syncretism, the blending of different religious traditions, and it happened slowly, organically, over centuries, not through any single emperor's decree. But here's what's really interesting. This process went both ways. It wasn't just Christianity absorbing pagan traditions. Pagan cultures were also absorbing Christian ideas, adapting them, making them their own. Take Saturnalia. After Constantine, after Christianity gained prominence, Saturnalia didn't immediately disappear. People kept celebrating it, but it started to change. It became less about worshiping Saturn and more just about celebrating, about having a good time in winter, about being with family, about giving gifts. By the 5th century, the Christian writer Macrobius could describe Saturnalia in detail, the feasts, the games, the gift-giving without really emphasizing the religious aspect at all. It had become secularized, in a way. Less about honoring a god, more about honoring tradition itself. And Christmas was doing the opposite journey, starting as a religious observance and gradually picking up all these cultural traditions around it. So by the medieval period, Christmas had become this fascinating hybrid. It was officially Christian. You went to church, you celebrated Jesus' birth, but it incorporated elements from Saturnalia, from Uli, from various Germanic winter festivals. It was a genuine merger of cultures. Now here's where it gets complicated. Because Constantine's conversion didn't just allow Christianity and paganism to coexist peacefully. It also set up an inevitable conflict. As Christianity became more powerful, more dominant, Christian leaders started to worry about all these pagan elements that had crept into Christmas celebrations. Were Christians celebrating Christ's birth? Or were they just continuing pagan revelry under a new name? Where was the line between honoring Jesus and dishonoring him? This tension would eventually explode in the medieval period when the church tried to regulate Christmas celebrations to make them more reverent, more focused on religion, and less on feasting and drinking and what they considered debauchery. But we're getting ahead of ourselves right now in the 4th and 5th centuries. Christianity is still growing, still spreading, still figuring out what it means to be the religion of the Roman Empire. And Santelia, it's still happening. The poet Macrobius, writing around 430 AD, describes elaborate Saturnia celebrations with pagan intellectuals gathering to feast and discuss philosophy. This is more than a century after Constantine's conversion. Christmas is established by now, but Saturnalia is still alive and well. In fact, a Christian calendar from 449 AD, the calendar of Polemius Silvius, still mentions Santelia. It notes that the festival used to honor the god Saturn, used to past tense, but it's still being celebrated just differently now. This is what I want you to understand. The transition from pagan Rome to Christian Rome wasn't clean, it wasn't sudden, it wasn't simple. It took centuries. And during those centuries, people were living in both worlds simultaneously. You might go to church on Sunday and celebrate Santelia in December. You might be a genuine Christian believer who still appreciated the old pagan traditions you grew up with. You might not even see a contradiction there. Cultural identity is complicated. Religion is complicated. People are complicated. Constantine understood this, whether his conversion was genuine or political. And honestly, it was probably some of both. He understood that you can't simply erase one culture and replace it with another overnight. You have to let them blend. You have to let people keep what's meaningful to them while gradually introducing new meanings. And that's exactly what happened with Christmas. The date came from Christian theological calculation, as we discussed. But the way people celebrated, the traditions, the customs, the feeling of the season that came from centuries of different cultures, sharing December, sharing winter, sharing the darkest time of year. Romans contributed their love of feasting, their tradition of gift-giving, and their decorated homes. The Norse contributed their rule logs, their 12 days of celebration, their focus on community and courage. The Germanic tribes contributed their evergreen trees, Enner, their winter bonfires, their emphasis on family. Early Christians contributed the theological meaning, the focus on Jesus, the connection to themes of light and salvation, and Constantine. Constantine's contribution wasn't creating Christmas. It was creating the space where all these traditions could meet, could interact, could eventually merge into something new. That's more important than any decree or any single policy could have been. Because what Constantine really did was make cultural exchange possible on a massive scale. He made it possible for a Jewish religious sect from Palestine to spread throughout the Roman Empire, to encounter Celtic druids and Norse warriors and Roman philosophers and Egyptian mystics, and to create something that incorporated elements from all of them. Christmas isn't pure. It never was. It's not originally pagan or originally Christian. It's both. It's neither. It's something that could only have existed in this specific historical moment when different cultures were colliding and merging and creating something entirely new. And that process, that beautiful, messy, complicated process of different traditions coming together, that was Constantine's true legacy. Not the vision at the Milvian Bridge, not the Council of Nika, not even the Edict of Milan, as important as that was. His legacy was making room for complexity, for cultural mixing, for traditions to evolve rather than being destroyed. Whether he intended it or not, Constantine helped create the conditions for Christmas as we know it to emerge. Not by decree, but by allowing Christianity and paganism to coexist long enough for them to learn from each other. And what emerged from that coexistence, after centuries of blending and borrowing and adapting, was a holiday that belonged to everyone and to no one. A holiday that could be celebrated by devout Christians and secular revelers alike. A holiday with roots so tangled you can't separate them anymore. That's not a bug, that's a feature. But this beautiful, messy merger of traditions, it was about to face its greatest test. Because while Christmas was slowly taking shape, slowly incorporating elements from multiple cultures, there were people who thought this was all wrong. People who thought Christmas had become too worldly, too pagan, too focused on celebration, and not enough on religion. And these people, these Puritan reformers, would eventually gain enough power to do something radical, something almost unthinkable. They would ban Christmas entirely, cancel it, and make it illegal to celebrate. And for a brief dark period in history, Christmas would actually die. Christmas Day 1620, Plymouth, Massachusetts. The Pilgrims have just arrived in the New World after a harrowing journey across the Atlantic. They're exhausted, they're cold, they're in a strange land with winter closing in. And what do they do on their first Christmas in America? They work, they build. They deliberately spend the entire day constructing their first building, making a statement that could not be more clear. We do not celebrate Christmas. We will not celebrate Christmas. Christmas to us is an abomination. Can you imagine? Your first Christmas in a new world, and you spend it hammering nails and sawing wood specifically to prove a point. But before we get to why the Puritans hated Christmas so much, and trust me, they really, really hated it, we need to understand what Christmas had become by the time they decided to cancel it. Because medieval Christmas was absolutely bonkers. And I mean that in the most wonderful, chaotic, magnificent way possible. Let me take you back about 400 years earlier to Christmas in medieval England. Picture a typical manor house somewhere in the countryside, December 1400. The celebration doesn't start on December 25th. Oh no, it starts a month earlier with Advent, 4 weeks of fasting, prayer, and preparation. No rich foods, no celebrations, just solemn anticipation. Think of it as the calm before the storm. Because when Christmas Day finally arrives, all hell breaks loose in the best possible way. First, everyone goes to church. The Christmas Mass, that's literally where we get the word Christmas. By the way, Christ's Mass is elaborate, beautiful, hours long. there's incense, there are candles, there's singing. The church is decorated with holly and ivy. For medieval people, this is the spiritual center of the celebration. This is what it's all about. But then, and this is the key thing, the party starts. And it doesn't stop for 12 days. 12 days straight. King Henry III, celebrating Christmas at Reading Abbey in 1226, ordered 40 salmon, massive amounts of venison, and boar meat. And I love this detail, as many lampreys as possible. Lamprey? Those eye-like parasitic fish that latch onto other fish and suck their blood. That's what medieval royalty considered a Christmas delicacy. Henry V in the early 1400s went even more extravagant. His Christmas menu included crayfish, eels, and porpoise. Yes, porpoise, dolphin's cousin, on the Christmas menu, and the drinking. Oh, the drinking. According to historian Anne Lawrence Matz, drinking was as important as eating during medieval Christmas, if not more so. Workers drank ale and spiced cider. The nobility drank wine by the barrel. Henry III once ordered 60 tons of wine for a Christmas celebration. That's over 76,000 bottles of wine for one party. Can you picture this? Can you imagine the chaos, the noise, the absolute mayhem of a medieval Christmas feast? But here's what I find most fascinating. Medieval Christmas wasn't just about excess. Every day had its own traditions, its own meaning, its own special madness. On December 26th, Boxing Day, the wealthy would give boxes of gifts and money to their servants. This was obligatory. You had to take care of the people who served you all year. It was a day of gratitude, of recognizing that the social hierarchy required generosity downward, not just obedience upward. On December the 28th, they celebrated the Feast of the Holy Innocents, commemorating the children Herod murdered trying to kill baby Jesus. And in a bizarre twist that only medieval people could come up with, this became a day when choir boys took over church services. Children would dress up in bishop's robes, conduct the service, and lead processions through town. The normal hierarchy is completely inverted. Then came January 1st, the Feast of Fools. And this is where medieval Christmas got truly wild. On the Feast of Fools, minor clergy, the low-ranking church officials who normally had no power, would take over church services and turn them into absolute circuses. They'd wear their clothes inside out. They'd lead a donkey into the church. They'd burn incense made from old shoes. Yes, burning shoe leather in church. They'd eat sausages and drink wine right there at the altar. They'd make sounds like donkeys. The church officially sanctioned this madness. For one day, once a year, the lowest members of the clergy got to mock authority, to be silly, to turn the sacred space into a carnival. Why would they allow this? Same reason the Romans had Saturnalia. Same reason the North celebrated Ule with role reversals. Because maintaining a strict hierarchy year-round requires pressure release. Because laughter is sacred too. Because even especially religious people need to not take themselves too seriously sometimes. But throughout all this, throughout all 12 days, there was one practice that really defined medieval Christmas. Mumming. Mamas were people, usually common folk, sometimes nobles in disguise, who would dress up in costumes, often wearing animal masks or dressing as the opposite gender, and go door to door to perform. They'd sing, they'd tell jokes, they'd act out little plays. Sometimes they did it for fun. Sometimes they expected gifts or money in return. Picture this. It's dark. It's cold. You're sitting by your fire and suddenly there's a knock at your door. You open it to find a group of people wearing bizarre animal masks and they burst into song. Medieval flash mob. Some people loved it. Some people found it terrifying, but everyone participated because this was Christmas. This was what you did. Now all of this, the feasting, the drinking, the mumming, the inversions of hierarchy, the Feast of Fools, all of this was technically Christian. It was all happening within a Christian framework, celebrating a Christian holiday. But you can see the pagan roots still showing through, can't you? The excess, the celebration, the temporary reversal of social order. It's Santelia with a Christian coding. And for most medieval people, this wasn't a problem. They could be genuinely devout Christians and still party like Vikings. They saw no contradiction between going to church in the morning and getting absolutely hammered by noon. Religion and revelry coexisted comfortably. But not everyone was comfortable with this. There were always critics, always people who thought Christmas had become too worldly, too focused on the flesh and not enough on the spirit. And in the 16th century, these critics found a voice. They found a movement. They found power. They called themselves Puritans. And they looked at medieval Christmas, the drinking, the feasting, the mumming, the Feast of Fools, all of it. And they were absolutely horrified. The Puritans believed in simplicity, in sobriety, in hard work. They believed that every day should be devoted to God with equal seriousness. They believed that special feast days distracted from true religion. They had this saying, "They for whom all days are holy can have no holiday." Think about that. If every day is sacred, then no day is special. If you're supposed to worship God with your whole being every single day, then having a special celebration on December 25th is actually insulting. It implies that the other 364 days don't matter as much. This was their theology, and they genuinely believed it. But there was something else going on too. The Puritans also believed that Christmas was too close to its pagan origins. They looked at all those Roman and Norse traditions we've been discussing, and they said, "This isn't Christian. This is pagan idolatry dressed up in Christian clothing. This is worshiping Saturn and calling it Jesus." They weren't entirely wrong, were they? We've spent this whole night talking about how Christmas absorbed pagan traditions. The Puritans saw that clearly. They just drew a different conclusion. If Christmas is tainted by paganism, then true Christians should reject it entirely. So when the Puritans gained political power in England in the 1640s, they did something extraordinary. They banned Christmas. December 19th, 1643, Parliament passed an ordinance that's worth quoting in full. This day in particular is to be kept with the more solemn humiliation because it may call to remembrance our sins and the sins of our forefathers who have turned this feast pretending the memory of Christ into an extreme forgetfulness of Him by giving liberty to carnal and sensual delights. Do you hear the disdain dripping from those words? Carnal and sensual delights. They're not just banning a holiday, they're making a moral judgment about everyone who ever enjoyed Christmas. In 1644, Parliament officially abolished Christmas along with Easter and Whit Sunday. These feast days, which had been celebrated for over 1,000 years, were simply cancelled, deleted from the calendar. In 1647, they reinforced the ban with even stricter laws. Churches were ordered to stay open on December 25th, treating it like any other day. Shops and markets were forced to operate. Anyone caught celebrating by not working, by feasting, by any special observation, could be fined or imprisoned. And when Oliver Cromwell became Lord Protector in 1653, he enforced these laws ruthlessly. Soldiers patrolled the streets on Christmas Day, looking for anyone celebrating. If they smelled food cooking, special food, or feast food, they'd confiscate it. If they saw decorations, they'd tear them down. If they found people gathered for celebration, they'd arrest them. For the first time in over a millennium, Christmas was illegal in England. But here's what I love about this story. People rebelled. They refused to comply. In 1647, riots broke out in Canterbury and other cities. Porch Christmas mobs took over entire towns for weeks, hanging holly on every doorway, shouting royalist slogans, basically throwing one massive, illegal Christmas party as an act of political resistance. Someone published a pamphlet called The Vindication of Christmas, arguing passionately for the old traditions, the feasts, the decorations, the card games, the dancing, the caroling, Father Christmas bringing joy. It was both a defense of Christmas and a criticism of Puritan killjoyism. The poet Robert Herrick wrote nostalgically about the Christmas that had been stolen, the carols, the Rule log, all the warm traditions that made winter bearable. And you know what? The ban failed. Not legally, it stayed on the books until 1660. But culturally, spiritually, in the hearts of the people, the ban failed completely. You can't legislate away joy. You can't ban meaning. You can't make people stop wanting to celebrate in the darkest time of year. When the monarchy was restored in 1660 and Charles took the throne, one of his first acts was to repeal all the Puritan laws. Christmas came roaring back. The poet Poor Robin wrote, "Now thanks to God for Charles' return, whose absence made old Christmas mourn, for then we scarcely did not know whether it was Christmas or not." But the damage was done. Christmas in England had been interrupted for nearly 2 decades. an entire generation had grown up without it. The old traditions, the elaborate 12-day celebrations, the Feast of Fools, the mumming, they came back, but they were never quite the same. Something had been broken. And across the Atlantic, in the Puritan colonies of New England, the ban lasted even longer. Remember those pilgrims building on Christmas Day 1620? That wasn't just a one-time statement. That became policy. In 1659, the Massachusetts Bay Colony made it official. Celebrating Christmas was illegal. The law stated that anyone caught observing by abstinence from labor, feasting, or any other way would be fined 5 shillings. 5 shillings for taking the day off. 5 shillings for having a special meal with your family. This ban lasted until 1681 in Massachusetts. But even after it was repealed, Christmas remained controversial in New England for centuries. It wasn't widely celebrated in Boston until the mid-1800s. The U.S. Congress met on Christmas Day as late as 1802. As if to say, this is just another day, nothing special here. Can you imagine living through this? Can you imagine being someone who grew up with Christmas, who loved Christmas, who found comfort and joy in those winter celebrations, and then having it all taken away? Being told that your happiness was sinful, that your traditions were pagan, that celebrating was a crime. Or imagine being a Puritan, genuinely believing that these celebrations were displeasing to God, watching people persist in what you saw as sin, feeling like the spiritual health of society was at stake. Both sides thought they were right. Both sides had reasons for their beliefs, and in the collision between them, Christmas died temporarily. But here's the beautiful thing. It came back. Not immediately, not easily, but it came back because the human need that Christmas addresses, the need for light in darkness, for joy in hardship, for community in isolation, that need doesn't go away just because someone passes a law. That need is deeper than theology. It's deeper than politics. It's in our bones. The Puritans could ban the party. They couldn't ban the longing. So Christmas survived its death. It hibernated for a while, kept alive in private homes, in secret gatherings, in memories and songs passed down quietly from generation to generation. And when it finally emerged again, when it was finally safe to celebrate openly, it came back transformed. Not quite the same as the medieval madness that the Puritans had banned, but not entirely different either. The question was, what would Christmas become in this new world? How would it evolve? Who would shape its next chapter? The answer would come from an unexpected place, not from England, where Christmas was slowly recovering from its Puritan trauma, and not from America, where Christmas was still viewed with suspicion in many communities. No, the next chapter of Christmas would be written in Germany, in the forests where Martin Luther once walked, among people who had kept their winter traditions alive, who had continued decorating trees and singing carols and celebrating with their families even when it wasn't fashionable, even when it wasn't safe. And from Germany, these traditions would spread back across Europe and across the ocean to America, carried by immigrants and artists and one particular royal couple whose Christmas celebration would be seen around the world and change everything. A winter evening in 16th century Germany. Martin Luther, yes, that Martin Luther, the one who sparked the Protestant Reformation, is walking home through the forest after visiting his congregation. It's cold, it's dark. The stars are so bright, they almost hurt to look at. And Luther stops. He looks up through the branches of the fir trees, and he sees something that takes his breath away. Starlight filtering through the evergreen needles, twinkling like 1,000 tiny miracles. He stands there in the snow, transfixed, and he thinks, I need to show my children this. I need to bring this wonder home. So Luther, according to legend anyway, goes home, cuts down a small fir tree, brings it inside, and decorates it with candles. He lights them and gathers his 6 children around. Look, he tells them, the candles represent the star that led the wise men to baby Jesus. This tree, which stays green even in winter, represents God's eternal love. That's the story. That's how the Christmas tree supposedly began. Now, is this story true? Almost certainly not. There's no contemporary evidence that Luther did this. The story doesn't appear in written sources until centuries after his death. It's probably a beautiful legend attached to a famous name. But here's what is true. By the 1500s, decorated evergreen trees were becoming a genuine tradition in Germany. And the story matters not because it's factual, but because it shows what people believed, that bringing a tree indoors at Christmas was a meaningful spiritual act, not just decoration. Let me tell you what actually happened, because it's even better than the legend. In Strasbourg, which was then part of the Holy Roman Empire, now part of France, there's a historical record from 1539 of a Christmas tree being set up in the cathedral, not in someone's home, in the church, under the leadership of the Protestant reformer Martin Bucer. This is revolutionary. This is taking something that might have had pagan associations, decorating trees in winter, and deliberately, explicitly Christianizing it, putting it in the church itself, making it part of Protestant worship. Then in 1570, a guild chronicle from Bremen describes a small tree decorated with apples, nuts, dates, pretzels, and paper flowers being set up in the guild house for the members' children to enjoy. The children got to collect the treats on Christmas Day. Do you see what's happening here? The tree is becoming associated with children, with gifts, with joy. It's not about theology anymore. It's about making children happy. By 1584, the chronicler Balthazar Rousseau describes an established tradition in Livonia, that's modern-day Estonia and Latvia, of putting up a decorated spruce tree in the market square. Young men and women would sing and dance around it. And then, and I love this detail, they'd set it on fire. Yes, they'd burn the Christmas tree deliberately as part of the celebration. Can you imagine your parents' reaction if you suggested burning the Christmas tree? But for these Baltic Germans, it made perfect sense. Fire represents light, warmth, and life. Burning the tree was a statement. We're turning this symbol of life into actual light and heat. We're transforming it. These traditions varied from place to place, but by the 1600s, Christmas trees were firmly established in Protestant German households. Catholic families, interestingly, didn't adopt them as quickly. They stuck with nativity scenes, the Kesh, as their primary Christmas decoration. The tree was seen as a Protestant thing. But here's what I find fascinating. Even though these trees were in Christian homes celebrating a Christian holiday, they still carried echoes of older traditions. Remember the paradise tree tradition. In Germany during the Middle Ages, December 24th was the feast day of Adam and Eve. Families would hang a fir tree with apples to represent the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. It was both a reminder of the fall of humanity, and since it was evergreen, a promise of redemption. Over time, the apples were joined by other decorations, cookies, painted nuts, paper flowers, and small gifts. Eventually, people started hanging these things on the tree year-round, not just on Adam and Eve's day. And the association shifted from Eden to Christmas, from the fall to the redemption. The tree became a symbol of life persisting through death, of hope enduring through winter, of God's love remaining constant, evergreen, no matter how dark things got. And those candles that supposedly Luther added, they became real. By the 1700s, German families were putting candles on their trees, real candles with real flames on a dry tree inside a wooden house. I cannot emphasize enough how dangerous this was. House fires from Christmas trees were incredibly common. People died, but they kept doing it anyway because the symbolism was too powerful to give up. Light in darkness, life in death, hope in winter. The tree with its candles glowing was worth the risk. Now, for a long time, this remained a German tradition. Other countries knew about it. Travelers would write about this curious German custom, but it didn't spread. England celebrated Christmas without trees. France celebrated without trees. America, where Christmas was still controversial in many places, definitely didn't have trees. But then in the early 1800s, everything changed. And it changed because of one woman, a German princess who married a British king. Her name was Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. She married King George III in 1761, and in the 1790s, she had Christmas trees set up at Windsor Castle. Now, this didn't immediately cause a sensation. The British aristocracy knew Charlotte was German, knew she had these odd German customs. They found it charming in a quaint, foreign sort of way, but it didn't catch on broadly. For the Christmas tree to really conquer Britain and through Britain the world, it needed something more. It needed a trendsetter. It needed someone everyone wanted to emulate. It needed Queen Victoria. Victoria became queen in 1837 at the age of 18. In 1840, she married her cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, another German prince. And Albert, like Charlotte before him, brought his German Christmas traditions with him. In 1840, Albert set up a Christmas tree at Windsor Castle for Victoria and their children. It was magnificent, a fir tree decorated with candles, ornaments, small gifts hanging from the branches. The royal family gathered around it on Christmas Eve, singing German carols, exchanging presents, being a family, warm, close, happy. And in 1848, the Illustrated London News published an engraving of this scene. Queen Victoria, Prince Albert, and their children gathered around their Christmas tree, admiring it with obvious delight. This image changed everything. You have to understand, Queen Victoria wasn't just popular, she wasn't just famous. She was the most influential trendsetter in the world. Whatever Victoria did, everyone wanted to do. If Victoria wore a certain dress style, that became the fashion. If Victoria liked a certain type of music, everyone listened to it. And now, Victoria has a Christmas tree. Within a few years, every middle-class and upper-class home in Britain wanted a Christmas tree. It became fashionable. It became the thing to do. Not because it was German, though it was, but because it was Victorian, because the Queen did it. The image crossed the Atlantic, too. The American women's magazine God's Lady's Book reprinted a modified version of the engraving in 1850. They cleverly removed Victoria's crown and Albert's mustache to make them look less obviously royal, more like an ordinary, well-to-do American family. The message was clear. You too can have a Christmas like this. You too can gather your family around a beautiful tree and create this moment of warmth and joy. And Americans who had been ambivalent about Christmas for centuries suddenly decided, yes, we want this. By the 1870s, Christmas trees were common in American homes. By the 1890s, you could buy commercially produced ornaments imported from Germany. By the early 1900s, the Christmas tree was as American as apple pie. But here's what's really interesting. The Christmas tree didn't just spread, it evolved. It adapted to each new culture that adopted it. In Germany, trees were traditionally decorated with edible items, apples, nuts, cookies, candies. The idea was that children would pick these treats off the tree throughout the 12 days of Christmas. The tree was interactive, consumable, and temporary. In Britain, Victoria and Albert started using more permanent decorations, glass balls, tinsel, and small toys. The tree became more about visual beauty, about creating a magical scene, than about providing treats. In America, the tree became bigger because of course it did. Everything in America becomes bigger. Americans wanted the tallest tree that would fit in their house. They wanted it covered, absolutely covered in decorations. More was more, and the tree topper became important. In Germany, trees were sometimes topped with the Christ child, the Christ kind. In Britain and America, people used angels or stars representing the Star of Bethlehem. Each one a different interpretation of what the tree meant. The tree also became democratized. In the early 1800s, only wealthy families could afford Christmas trees. By the late 1800s, there were Christmas tree farms, making them affordable for middle-class families. By the early 1900s, even working-class families could have a tree. But this created a problem. People were cutting down so many trees that forests were being destroyed. In Germany, where the tradition started, deforestation became a serious concern. So in the 1880s, Germans started making artificial trees. The first ones were made from goose feathers dyed green attached to wire branches. Yes, goose feather Christmas trees. They were actually quite beautiful, soft, delicate. They caught the light from candles in this really lovely way. These were exported to America and other countries. Eventually, goose feathers were replaced by other materials, brush bristles, aluminum, and plastic. By the 1930s, a manufacturer of toilet bowl brushes allegedly used surplus bristles to create artificial trees. Yes, your great-grandmother's Christmas tree might have been made from the same material as a toilet brush. Merry Christmas. Today, about 84% of American households use artificial trees. The real tree industry still exists. There are about 15,000 Christmas tree farms in the US, growing over 300 million trees. But most people prefer the convenience of plastic. And you know what? Martin Luther, if he had actually invented the Christmas tree, would probably be horrified. Plastic trees with electric lights, mass-produced in factories, put up in shopping malls to sell products. But I think he'd also recognize something essential. Families still gather around the tree. Children still look at it with wonder. It still represents something deeper than just decoration. The tree still says, life persists, hope endures, light returns. Now, the Christmas, just one part of the Victorian transformation of Christmas. Because while Prince Albert was introducing trees to Britain, something else was happening. Something that would prove even more influential in shaping the modern Christmas. A writer, a brilliant, passionate, slightly bitter writer who needed money desperately, sat down in the fall of 1843 to write a short book. Something he could get published quickly. Something that would sell well for the Christmas season. His name was Charles Dickens, and the book he wrote in about 6 weeks would do more to define Christmas than anything else in the past 1,000 years. But Dickens wasn't trying to create traditions. He wasn't trying to save Christmas, or revive Christmas, or reinvent Christmas. He was trying to make rent. He was trying to pay his bills. He had a wife and kids and creditors breathing down his neck. And yet what he created almost accidentally, almost despite himself, would transform Christmas from a minor holiday that many people ignored into the most important secular celebration in the Western world. Because Dickens understood something that no one else quite had. Christmas wasn't really about theology or history or ancient traditions. Christmas was about feeling, about emotion, about hope and redemption and second chances. Christmas, Dickens realized, was about who we could become if we just tried a little harder to be human. And when he sat down to write A Christmas Carol in October 1843, working frantically to meet his deadline, he had no idea he was about to change everything. December 19th, 1843, London. A small book goes on sale for the first time, 5 shillings bound in red cloth with gilt edges, hand-colored illustrations. The title, A Christmas Carol in Prose, being a ghost story of Christmas. The author is Charles Dickens, 31 years old, already famous, but desperately broke. Within 5 days, all 6,000 copies of the first printing were sold. Within a month, it's the most talked about book in England. Within a year, unauthorized stage adaptations are playing in theaters across London. Within a decade, people are saying that Charles Dickens didn't just write a Christmas story, he invented Christmas itself. And you know what's wild? They weren't entirely wrong. But to understand what Dickens did, you need to understand what Christmas was like when he sat down to write that little book. Because in 1843, Christmas was dying again. Not banned like it had been during the Puritan era, but fading, becoming irrelevant. In the cities, the new industrial cities that were transforming England, Christmas barely existed anymore. Think about what was happening in the 1840s. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing. People were flooding from farms into factories. Entire communities that had celebrated together for generations were being torn apart. Workers lived in crowded slums, working 14-hour days, 6 days a week. There was no time for 12 days of celebration. There was barely time to sleep. The old Christmas traditions, the communal feasts, the mumming, the gathering of the whole village, they required stable communities, agricultural rhythms, time, none of which industrial workers had. And the middle class, the growing middle class that was defining Victorian culture, were suspicious of Christmas. It seemed too working ass, too rowdy, too associated with drunkenness and disorder. It seemed old-fashioned, medieval, not modern. Christmas by the early 1840s was becoming a holiday for children and nostalgic old people. Everyone else had moved on. Enter Charles Dickens. Dickens was born in 1812, just as the Industrial Revolution was accelerating. His father was a clerk who couldn't manage money and eventually ended up in debtor's prison. Young Charles at age 12 was sent to work in a blacking factory, a shoe polish factory, 10 hours a day labeling bottles. He saw poverty. He saw what industrialization did to families. He saw children treated as disposable labor, and he never forgot it. Every word he ever wrote afterward was haunted by those memories. By 1843, Dickens was a successful novelist. The Pick Papers, Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, These had made him famous. But success didn't mean financial security. He had a wife, 5 children, a large house, and expensive tastes. His previous novel hadn't sold well. His publishers were pressuring him. He owed money. So, in October 1843, Dickens decided to write a Christmas book, something short, something that could be produced quickly and sold for the holiday season, a guaranteed moneymaker. He wrote it in about 6 weeks, working frantically, sometimes walking the streets of London at night because the ideas were flowing too fast to sleep. He laughed while writing the funny parts. He cried while writing the sad parts. He was possessed by this story. And what he created was something entirely new. A Christmas Carol isn't really about Christmas, not in the way medieval Christmas celebrations were about Christmas. There's no Jesus in it, no nativity scene, no discussion of theology. The religious content is minimal. Instead, it's about something else. Redemption, second chances, the possibility that people can change. The radical idea that a hard, cruel, selfish man like Ebenezer Scrooge could become generous and kind, not through divine intervention, but through being shown the consequences of his choices. It's about looking at your life and asking, am I living the way I want to? Am I becoming the person I want to be? And if not, if I've become cold and isolated and miserable, is it too late to change? The answer Dickens gives is no. It's never too late. You can always change. You can always choose differently. You can always open your heart. This is revolutionary. Think about it. In traditional Christian theology, redemption comes through Christ, through grace, through faith. But in Dickens' story, redemption comes through self-awareness, through empathy, through choosing to care about other people. It's a secular salvation story, a humanistic gospel, and it resonated in ways that traditional religious Christmas celebrations hadn't. Because here's what Dickens understood. People in industrial England, people working in factories, living in cities, separated from the old agricultural communities. They were lonely, they were isolated, they were losing connection to each other. The old bonds that held society together were fraying. And Christmas, Dickens realized, could be the answer. Not Christmas as a religious obligation, not Christmas as a rowdy festival, but Christmas as a time for families to gather, for people to reconnect, for the wealthy to remember the poor, for everyone to be a little kinder, a little more generous, a little more human. Look at how he describes it in the book. The Ghost of Christmas Presents says, "There are some upon this earth of yours who lay claim to know us, and who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name, who are as strange to us and all our kith and kin as if they had never lived. Remember that, and charge their doings on themselves, not us." Do you hear what he's saying? People who use Christmas to exclude others, to judge others, to feel superior, they don't understand Christmas. They've missed the whole point. The point, Dickens says, is this. It is good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself, and later. Christmas is a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. Fellow passengers to the grave. That phrase haunts me. We're all temporary. We're all fragile. We're all going to die. So why are we cruel to each other? Why are we isolated from each other? Why do we treat Christmas as anything other than an opportunity to love the people around us while we still can? This was Dickens's Christmas philosophy, and it struck a chord. The book was an immediate sensation, but not just because people liked the story. It was because people needed this message. They needed to be reminded that connection was possible, that generosity was possible, that they could choose to be better than the harsh, competitive, isolated lives industrial capitalism was forcing them into. Within weeks of publication, factories started giving their workers Christmas Day off. Not because it was required, but because Scrooge giving Bob Cratchit the day off had made it seem cruel not to. Wealthy families started organizing Christmas dinners for the poor. Inspired by the story, the idea of Christmas as a time for charity became embedded in Victorian culture. Dickens didn't invent these ideas. We've seen versions of them in earlier Christmas celebrations, but he packaged them in a way that resonated with modern urban industrial people. He made Christmas relevant again, and he did it by focusing not on the birth of Jesus, but on the character of Ebenezer Scrooge. Think about Scrooge for a moment. At the beginning of the story, he's everything Victorian society valued. He's successful, he's disciplined, he's rational, he's not wasting money on frivolous celebrations. He's exactly what a good capitalist should be, and he's miserable. Completely, utterly, soul-crushingly miserable. His success has cost him everything that matters: love, friendship, joy, connection. He's rich and he's alone. The ghosts don't show him theology, they show him his own life. They show him what he's lost, what he's losing, what he'll lose if he doesn't change. And that's enough. That's what transforms him. On Christmas morning, Scrooge wakes up and he's different. Not because he's found religion, though the story has Christian overtones, but because he's found humanity, his own humanity, his capacity for joy and generosity and love. And what does he do? He buys the Cratchits a massive turkey. He raises Bob's salary. He becomes like a second father to Tiny Tim. He starts laughing, starts celebrating, starts living. The story ends with one of the most famous lines in English literature. It was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well if any man alive possessed the knowledge. I knew how to keep Christmas well. Not celebrating Christmas, not observed Christmas, keep Christmas. As if Christmas was something fragile, something that required tending, something you had to work to maintain. And that's exactly what Dickens thought. Christmas to him was an attitude, a practice, a commitment. It was choosing every day to be generous instead of miserly, to be open instead of closed, to be connected instead of isolated. This is why A Christmas Carol still matters, why it's adapted endlessly. Why does everyone know the story even if they've never read the book? Because Scrooge's journey is our journey. His transformation is the transformation we all hope is possible for ourselves. We all have parts of us that are like Scrooge, cold, defensive, protecting ourselves by pushing others away. And we all long to believe that those parts can change, that we can wake up one morning and choose differently, choose better. Dickens gave us that hope, and he wrapped it in Christmas. But A Christmas Carol was just one part of Dickens's Christmas project. He wrote other Christmas books, The Chimes, The Cricket on the Hearth, The Battle of Life. None were as successful as A Christmas Carol, but they all hammered home the same message. Christmas is about human connection, about compassion, about choosing to care. And Dickens lived this philosophy. He gave public readings of A Christmas Carol for charity. He organized Christmas parties for poor children. He wrote editorials about the working conditions in factories, about the need for education and health care for the poor. He used his fame, his platform, his considerable literary gifts to argue that society owed something to its most vulnerable members, that the wealthy had a responsibility to the poor, that we were all, as he put it, fellow passengers to the grave. This wasn't just a theory for Dickens. His own father had been imprisoned for debt. He'd worked as a child laborer. He knew what poverty felt like, what desperation felt like. And he used Christmas specifically, as a way to remind comfortable, middle-class readers that suffering existed, that they could help, that they had a moral obligation to help. This is why people say Dickens invented Christmas. He didn't. Obviously, Christmas existed for centuries before Dickens, but he gave it a new meaning. He transformed it from a religious holiday with pagan trappings into a secular celebration of human kindness. He made Christmas about family gatherings. Notice how central the Cratchit family is to the story. He made it about children. Tiny Tim becomes the emotional center of everything. He made it about generosity to the poor. Scrooge's transformation is measured by his willingness to give. He made it about food and celebration. The descriptions of Christmas feasts in the book are glorious. All the things you associate with a modern Christmas, the family dinner, the focus on children, the charitable giving, the emphasis on joy and celebration, rather than solemn religious observance. Dickens either invented these or popularized them so effectively that they became the default, and the Victorian middle class ate it up because Dickens was telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. You can be good capitalists and good people. You can be successful and generous. You can enjoy your wealth and still care about the poor. Christmas is the time to balance these things, to be your best selves. Whether this was naive or revolutionary or both is a debate historians still have. But it worked. Within a generation, Christmas had been completely transformed. It wasn't a minor holiday anymore. It wasn't fading away. It was the centerpiece of Victorian social life. Other writers jumped on board. Washington Irving in America had already been romanticizing old Christmas traditions in his stories. Now, inspired by Dickens, dozens of other writers started producing Christmas books, Christmas stories, Christmas poems, and the Victorian Christmas industry was born. Christmas cards, which had been invented in 1843, the same year as A Christmas Carol, exploded in popularity. Christmas crackers were invented in 1847. Special Christmas editions of magazines became huge sellers. Retailers started creating elaborate window displays for Christmas. Christmas was becoming commercial. Christmas was becoming big business. And while Dickens probably would have had mixed feelings about that, he'd started the ball rolling. Because once you make Christmas about giving gifts, about celebrating with material abundance, about showing love through purchasing power, well, capitalism is very good at running with that idea. But at the heart of it, at the center of this Victorian Christmas revolution, was something genuine, something that Dickens truly believed and that resonated with millions of people. We need each other. We need connection. We need compassion. We need to be reminded at least once a year that we're all fellow passengers to the grave and we should treat each other accordingly. That message, that deeply human, deeply simple message, is why A Christmas Carol endures. Why Dickens's Christmas philosophy endures. Why even now in a world Dickens couldn't have imagined, we still gather with family, still give gifts, still try to be a little kinder during this season. We're still trying to keep Christmas well. Still trying to be a little less like Scrooge before the ghosts, a little more like Scrooge after. Still trying to open our shut-up hearts. Now, Dickens popularized the Victorian Christmas in England. But for this new Christmas to truly conquer the world, it needed to cross the Atlantic. It needed to take root in America, which had been deeply suspicious of Christmas for centuries. And for that to happen, Christmas needed one more piece, one more character, one more iconic figure who would make the holiday irresistible, especially to children. Someone who would embody everything the Victorian Christmas stood for: generosity, magic, joy, and wonder. Christmas needed Santa Claus, and the creation of the modern Santa is a story so strange, so unexpected, that you'll never look at him the same way again. There's a man who's been watching over us this whole time. Through the Roman festivals, through the Norse celebrations, through the medieval feasts and the Puritan bans and the Victorian revival, he's been there shape-shifting, evolving, becoming different things to different people. Sometimes he wore the red and white robes of a bishop. Sometimes he dressed in green like an English nobleman. Sometimes he looked stern and holy. Sometimes he looked jolly and round. Sometimes he rode a white horse. Sometimes he rode a donkey. Sometimes he had a sleigh pulled by reindeer. His name has changed too. Saint Nicholas, Sinterklaas, Father Christmas, Kris Kringle, Papa Noel, and finally the name that would stick in America and spread around the world, Santa Claus. But who is he really? Where did he come from? And how did a 4th century Turkish bishop become a chubby, rosy-checked man in a red suit who lives at the North Pole and judges whether you've been naughty or nice? That's a story that spans continents and centuries. And it starts with a real person who did something extraordinary. The year is around 280 AD. In the city of Myra, in what's now Turkey, a boy is born into a wealthy Christian family. His name is Nicholas. And according to legend, and with Nicholas we have to say according to legend a lot, he was pious from birth. Some stories say he refused to nurse on fast days as a baby, because even baby Nicholas was that devout. Nicholas grows up, becomes a priest, eventually becomes the Bishop of Myra, and he becomes famous for one thing: giving away money to people who need it. The most famous story about St. Nicholas goes like this. There's a poor man in Myra with 3 daughters. He can't afford dowries for them, which means they can't get married, which means in that culture at that time, they'll probably end up in prostitution. It's a desperate situation. Nicholas hears about this, and one night he throws a bag of gold through the man's window. enough for the eldest daughter's dowry. She gets married, crisis averted. Then Nicholas does it again for the second daughter, another bag of gold through the window. By the time the third daughter is of age, the father is waiting, curious to see who his mysterious benefactor is, and he catches Nicholas in the act, sneaking up to throw a third bag of gold. Some versions say Nicholas threw the gold down the chimney and it landed in a stocking that was hanging by the fire to dry. And that's supposedly where the tradition of hanging stockings comes from. Now, is this story true? We don't know. Nicholas was a real person. He really was Bishop of Myra. He really did die around 343 AD. But the stories about him were written down centuries after his death. They're hagiography, saint stories designed to inspire devotion, not historical biographies. But here's what matters. People believed these stories, and Nicholas became the patron saint of children, sailors, merchants, and just about everyone else. Hundreds of churches were built in his honor. His feast day, December 6th, became a major celebration throughout Christian Europe. And on December 6th, children would put out their shoes, and good children would find them filled with treats. Bad children would find switches or coal. Do you see it? The gift giving, the reward for good behavior, the magical figure who knows whether you've been good or bad. It's all there already in medieval celebrations of St. Nicholas. But St. Nicholas looked nothing like modern Santa. He was thin, usually depicted as elderly, wearing the traditional robes of a bishop, red with white trim, yes, but formal, ecclesiastical, serious. He carried a staff. He looked holy, not jolly. So how did we get from Bishop Nicholas to Santa Claus? The transformation happened gradually through a process of cultural mixing that started with Dutch immigration to America. In the Netherlands, St. Nicholas was called Sinterklaas, and Dutch settlers brought Sinterklaas to New Amsterdam, which became New York in the 1600s. Sinclair's class still looked like a bishop. He still rode a white horse. He still came on December 6th, not December 25th. And he still had this slightly stern, judgmental quality. He rewarded good children, yes, but he also punished bad ones. His helper, this is a detail that didn't make it to America, was Piet, Black Pete, whose origins and depiction are problematic, to put it mildly. But that's a whole separate discussion about racism in European holiday traditions. The point is, Sinterklaas in the Netherlands was still very much a religious figure connected to the church, connected to St. Nicholas's actual history. But in America, something interesting happened. Dutch traditions mixed with German traditions, mixed with English traditions, and Santa Claus started to change. The pivotal moment, the moment when Santa Claus, as we know him, starts to emerge, happens on December 23rd, 1823. A poem is published anonymously in a New York newspaper. It's called A Visit from St. Nicholas, but you probably know it as The Night Before Christmas. The poem begins, "It was the night before Christmas when all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." And it goes on to describe St. Nicholas, or rather Santa Claus as the poem calls him, in a completely new way. He's described as a right jolly old elf, not a bishop, not a saint, an elf, small, magical, playful. He had a little round belly that shook when he laughed, like a bowl full of jelly. He's chubby, he's jolly, he's anything but stern and ecclesiastical. He's dressed in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. Not bishop's robes, something more practical, more working ass. He has a broad face and a little round belly. He has rosy cheeks and a nose like a cherry. His eyes twinkle, he smiles, he winks. And crucially, he comes on Christmas Eve, not December 6th. He comes down the chimney. He fills stockings. He drives a sleigh pulled by 8 reindeer, which the poem names Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Da, and Blitzen. Do you realize how revolutionary this is? In one poem, the author, later identified as Clement Clark Moore, though there's some debate about this, completely reimagined St. Nicholas, took him from a religious figure and turned him into something else, something secular, something magical, something fun. And the poem was a sensation. It was reprinted in newspapers across America. People memorized it, recited it. Within a generation, this version of Santa Claus, jolly round, reindeer driving, chimney descending, became the default. But he still didn't look the way we picture him now. For that, we need another crucial figure, Thomas Nast. Nast was a political cartoonist, probably the most influential cartoonist in American history, and starting in the 1860s, he began drawing Santa Claus for Harper's Weekly magazine. Nast's Santa was revolutionary. He took Moore's description and visualized it, made it concrete, made it real. Nast was big, not elf-sized, but a full-grown man, just rounder than most. He had a full white beard. He wore a red suit with white fur trim. He looked grandfatherly, warm, approachable, and Nast added details that weren't in Moore's poem. He put Santa at the North Pole. That was Nast's invention. He showed Santa reading letters from children. He depicted Santa keeping lists of naughty and nice children. He drew Santa's workshop with elves making toys. All of this, the North Pole, the workshop, the elves, the lists, came from Thomas Nast's imagination. And because his cartoons were so popular, so widely seen, these details became canon. They became part of the Santa Claus story that everyone knows. But Nast's Santa still varied in appearance from drawing to drawing. Sometimes his suit was brown, sometimes red, sometimes he looked thin, sometimes fat. The image wasn't quite fixed yet. The final piece of the puzzle came in the 1920s and 1930s with the Coca-Cola Company's Christmas advertisements. Now, there's a myth that Coca-Cola invented the modern image of Santa Claus, that they made him wear red and white to match their corporate colors. This isn't true. Santa was already wearing red by the time Coca-Cola started using him in ads. Nast had already established that, but what Coca-Cola did through a series of paintings by artist Hayden Sunlum was to standardize the image. Sunlum painted Santa the same way every year. Same red suits, white trim, same rosy cheeks, same twinkly eyes, same warm grandfatherly smile. These paintings appeared in magazines, in stores, in homes across America. And because they were consistent, because you saw the same Santa year after year, that image became fixed in the cultural imagination. By the 1940s, this was Santa Claus, not Santa Claus, not St. Nicholas, not Father Christmas. This specifically, this jolly, round, red-sweeted, North Pole dwelling, reindeer-driving, toy-making, list-keeping Santa was the definitive version. And from America, this Santa spread back across the world to England, where he merged with and largely replaced Father Christmas, to Europe, to Latin America, to Asia. Everywhere, Christmas was celebrated. This American Santa showed up. But here's what fascinates me about Santa's evolution. At every stage, he represented something different, something that culture needed. Medieval St. Nicholas was about charity, about the church's role in caring for the poor. He was stern because morality was serious business. He was a bishop because religious authority mattered. Dutch center class was about teaching children to be good, about social order, about respecting authority. He was still connected to the church, still part of a religious framework. But American Santa was about something else entirely. He was about magic, about generosity without judgment. Notice that Santa doesn't actually punish naughty children in the American tradition. He just doesn't bring them presents. He was about making children happy, about creating wonder, about the idea that good things can happen just because that you can be rewarded just for being a child. American Santa was also, and this is important, completely divorced from religion. He's not St. Nicholas anymore. He's not even explicitly Christian. He's secular magic, universal magic. Anyone can believe in Santa, regardless of their faith or lack thereof. This is why Santa succeeded in America when so many European Christmas traditions didn't quite take root, because America was religiously diverse, increasingly secular, and Americans wanted a Christmas that everyone could celebrate. Santa provided that he was Christmas without the Christianity. He was joyful without Jesus. Now, some Christians, then and now, are uncomfortable with this. They see Santa as a distraction from the real meaning of Christmas. They worry that children focus on Santa instead of the nativity story. They have a point. Santa has in many ways eclipsed the religious aspects of Christmas in popular culture. But I think there's something beautiful about what Santa represents, because at his core, whether he's St. Nicholas or Santa Claus, he's about the same thing. The idea that someone out there cares about you, that someone is paying attention to whether you're good or bad, not to punish you, but because your behavior matters. That generosity is possible, that magic is possible, that the world can be more wonderful than it appears. Children believe in Santa, not just because their parents tell them to, but because they want to believe. Because the alternative that the world is purely material, purely rational, purely predictable is depressing. Santa represents the possibility that something more exists, something magical, something good. And when children eventually learn the truth, that Santa isn't real, that their parents were the ones putting presents under the tree, what do they discover? They discover that their parents loved them enough to create magic for them. That their parents stayed up late on Christmas Eve, wrapping presents, eating the cookies, creating this elaborate fiction, all to make their children happy. The magic doesn't disappear when you learn Santa isn't real. It just shifts. It becomes human magic, the magic of love, of effort, of parents choosing to create wonder for their children. That's what Santa Claus really is. Not a myth that deceives children, but a story that teaches them that joy is possible, that generosity is real, that people, real, flawed human people, will go to extraordinary lengths to make the ones they love happy. And when those children grow up and have their own children, they become Santa. They perpetuate the magic. They wrap presents at midnight and eat the cookies and keep the story alive because they remember how it felt to believe. And they want their children to feel that too. This is why Santa endures, not because he's an ancient tradition. He's not really. The modern Santa is barely 150 years old. But because he fulfills a deep human need, the need to believe that someone out there cares, that generosity is possible, that the world can be magical. From St. Nicholas throwing gold through windows to modern Santa delivering toys via chimney, the story has always been the same. Giving makes us human. Generosity makes us whole. And the ability to create joy for others, especially children, is itself a kind of magic. But Santa Claus, for all his power, for all his cultural influence, was just one part of Christmas's transformation into the global phenomenon it became. Because by the early 20th century, Christmas wasn't just a holiday anymore. It was becoming an industry, an economy, a commercial juggernaut that would eventually dwarf every other holiday in the Western world. And that transformation, the transformation of Christmas from a religious and cultural celebration into the biggest shopping season of the year, that's a story that says something profound about who we are, what we value, and what happens when capitalism gets hold of something sacred. November 1867. Charles Dickens is in America giving public readings of A Christmas Carol. It's exhausting work. He's performing almost every night, traveling constantly. His health is failing, but the tour is making him a fortune, literally a fortune. Americans are paying top dollar to hear the man who invented Christmas read his famous story aloud. And on December 25, 1867, Christmas Day itself, Dickens didn't rest. He doesn't celebrate with family. He doesn't go to church. He performs. He reads A Christmas Carol to a packed theater, charging admission, making money. The irony is almost painful, isn't it? The man who wrote about Ebenezer Scrooge's transformation from miser to generous spirit is working on Christmas Day to make as much money as possible from the very story about not being obsessed with money. But here's the thing, Dickens needed the money. He had dependents, debts, obligations, and he genuinely believed he was doing good, bringing his Christmas philosophy to people, inspiring them to be better. The fact that he was also getting rich doing it, that wasn't a contradiction to him. That was just how the world worked, and that tension between the spiritual meaning of Christmas and the commercial reality of Christmas. That's what we need to talk about now, because Christmas, more than any other holiday, has become a battleground between sacredness and sale, between meaning and money, between what we say we value and what we actually spend our resources on. Let's start with a question. When did Christmas become commercial? Most people would say sometime in the 20th century, maybe after World War II when the American economy began and consumerism took off, or maybe in the Victorian era with the Christmas cards and the presents under the tree. But the truth, Christmas has always been commercial. Always. Remember Stenelia? Romans gave gifts to Eve. They bought candles in the marketplace. They purchased food for their feasts. The festival created economic activity. It always has. Medieval Christmas. Lords bought massive amounts of food and wine and entertainment for their 12-day celebrations. That was commerce. That was consumption. Victorian Christmas. The cards, the crackers, the ornaments, the toys, all of it was manufactured, sold, purchased. The Industrial Revolution made Christmas commercial because it made everything commercial. It created the capacity to mass-produce things, which created the need to mass-market things, which created consumer culture. So Christmas didn't suddenly become commercial. It's always had a commercial aspect. What changed is the scale, the intensity, the overwhelming dominance of the commercial over everything else. Here's a statistic that tells you everything. In 2019, before the pandemic disrupted everything, Americans spent approximately $730 billion on Christmas. That's a billion with a B in 1 year on one holiday. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire GDP of Switzerland, more than Saudi Arabia spends on everything in a year. Christmas in America alone is a nearly $1 trillion industry. Where does all that money go? About $465 billion on gifts, about $90 billion on decorations, about $23 billion on greeting cards, about $18 billion on Christmas trees, about $13 billion on holiday foods and beverages. These numbers are so big, they stop meaning anything, don't they? So let me put it differently. The average American household spends about $9 to $97 on Christmas, nearly $1,000 in 1 month on one holiday. For many families, this isn't joyful, it's stressful, it's anxiety-inducing. It's going into debt to buy things for people who might not even want them, because that's what you're supposed to do. How did we get here? How did a holiday about the birth of a baby in a manger, about light and darkness, about human connection and generosity become this massive engine of consumption? The answer is gradually, and then all at once. The Victorian era set the template. The Christmas card, invented in 1843, the same year as A Christmas Carol, remember, became hugely popular when the British Postal Service introduced the penny post. Suddenly, for just a penny, you could send Christmas greetings to anyone in the country. By the 1860s, millions of Christmas cards were being sold every year. Tom Smith's Christmas crackers, invented in 1847, became another Victorian tradition that was also a commercial product. You bought them in stores from companies that advertised them in newspapers. The Christmas tree industry exploded. In the early 1800s, you cut your own tree from the forest. By the late 1800s, you could buy one from a vendor in the city. By the early 1900s, there were commercial Christmas tree farms. In 1901, when President Theodore Roosevelt refused to have a Christmas tree in the White House to protest deforestation, he was acknowledging that Christmas trees had become such a widespread commercial product that they were threatening forests and the toys. Oh, the toys. Before the Victorian era, children might get one small gift for Christmas, an orange, some nuts, maybe a simple wooden toy. But as manufacturing capacity grew, as the middle class grew, as the idea of childhood as a special time that should be filled with magic grew, the toy industry exploded. By the late 1800s, toy catalogs were being published. Department stores were creating elaborate toy displays. And the idea that good parents should buy their children multiple presents for Christmas became normalized. This is where Santa Claus comes in again. Because Santa, remember, doesn't make his gifts anymore in most people's imagination. He brings gifts that look suspiciously like the ones in stores. Santa became, in effect, a mascot for consumer culture, the ultimate symbol of getting things. And retailers figured this out fast. By the 1870s, department stores were using Christmas displays to drive sales. Macy's in New York, Selfridges in London, all the big stores. They turned Christmas into an event, an experience, a reason to come downtown and shop. In 1874, Macy's introduced the first in-tour Santa Claus. Children could visit Santa, tell him what they wanted, and conveniently all those toys were available for purchase right there in the store. This was brilliant marketing, and it worked. Christmas became the make-or-break season for retailers. A bad Christmas could put you out of business. A good Christmas could make your whole year. And that pressure, that economic pressure, has only intensified over time. In 1939, President Franklin D. Roosevelt tried to move Thanksgiving a week earlier to extend the Christmas shopping season. Why? Because the country was still recovering from the Great Depression. Retailers lobbied him, saying they needed more shopping days to survive. The outcry was so intense that Roosevelt eventually had to reverse the decision. But the fact that he tried tells you something. By 1939, Christmas shopping was already seen as essential to the American economy. After World War II, it got even more intense. The post-war economic boom meant more people had disposable income. Suburbs were growing, malls were being built, television came along, bringing advertising into every home, and Christmas became the centerpiece of the consumer calendar. Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, traditionally the start of the Christmas shopping season, became infamous for chaos, for crowds, for people camping outside stores, for stampedes and fights, and occasionally injuries and deaths, all to get a good deal on a television or a toy. Then came Cyber Monday. Then came pre-Black Friday sales. Then came Christmas and July promotions. The Christmas shopping season kept expanding, starting earlier and earlier, until by the 2000s, some stores were putting out Christmas merchandise in October. And here's where things get complicated. Because it's easy to just condemn all of this, to say Christmas has been ruined by commercialization. It's lost its meaning. It's become shallow and materialistic. And there's truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that. But it's not the whole truth, because for many people, buying gifts for their loved ones is an expression of love. It's how they show care. Spending time choosing the perfect gift, spending money they might not really have, wrapping it beautifully, seeing the joy on someone's face when they open it. That matters. That's meaningful. Is it the same as the generosity Dickens wrote about? The same as St. Nicholas throwing gold through windows? Maybe not. But it's not nothing. And for many families, the Christmas shopping trip is itself a tradition. Going to the mall together, looking at decorations, drinking hot chocolate, picking out a tree. These are memories. These are moments of connection. Yes, they're commercial. Yes, they're consumerist, but they're also real. They're also meaningful to the people experiencing them. This is the paradox of commercial Christmas. It can be both exploitative and genuine. It can be both shallow and meaningful. It can be both about selling things and about expressing love. The problem isn't that Christmas involves commerce. It always has. The problem is when commerce overwhelms everything else. When the focus on buying things drowns out the other parts, the connection, the generosity to those who need it, the pausing to reflect, the choosing to be kinder. And that's happening. That's absolutely happening. Studies show that the average American feels stressed about Christmas, stressed about buying the right gifts, stressed about affording everything, stressed about meeting expectations, stressed about traveling to see family, stressed about hosting, stressed about everything. The holiday that's supposed to bring joy has become a source of anxiety for millions of people. And yet, we keep doing it. We keep buying, we keep spending, we keep participating in this massive commercial apparatus even when it makes us unhappy. Why? Partly, it's social pressure. Everybody else is doing it, so you have to do it too. You can't be the person who doesn't give gifts. You can't tell your kids Santa isn't coming because you've decided to opt out of commercial Christmas. Partly, it's advertising. We're bombarded with messages telling us that love is expressed through purchasing, that the perfect gift will create the perfect moment, that Christmas only counts if you spend enough money. Partly, it's genuine desire. We want to make people happy. We want to create magic. And in a consumer culture, buying things is the primary way we've learned to do that. But here's what I find most interesting. Every few years there's a backlash. People declare they're going to have a simple Christmas this year. Just family time, no presents, or maybe homemade gifts only. They're going to resist the commercialization, get back to what Christmas is really about. And sometimes they do for a year, maybe two, but then they slip back because fighting against the commercial current is exhausting. Because your kids see what other kids get and feel left out. Because opting out of commercial Christmas can feel like opting out of Christmas entirely. The commercial infrastructure is so complete, so all-encompassing that it's become almost impossible to separate Christmas from consumption. There's even a phrase for this now, the war on Christmas. You've heard it, right? The idea that saying Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas is somehow attacking Christmas is trying to make it disappear. But here's the irony. The real war on Christmas, if we want to call it that, isn't coming from people who say happy holidays. It's coming from the commercialization itself. It's coming from the transformation of a spiritual and cultural celebration into a massive shopping season where the meaning gets lost in the noise of cash registers. Dickens would be horrified. The man who wrote about Scrooge learning that people matter more than money, that generosity is about connection, not calculation. He'd look at Black Friday stampedes and Cyber Monday shopping cart abandonment rates and Christmas credit card debt, and he'd be appalled. And yet, Dickens himself was making money from Christmas, was touring on Christmas Day, was selling his books, his readings, his Christmas philosophy as a commercial product. So maybe he'd understand. Maybe he'd see that we're all stuck in this same tension, this same paradox. We want Christmas to be meaningful. We want it to be about love and connection and generosity. But we live in a commercial culture, and commerce is how we express most things. The question isn't, can we have a completely non-commercial Christmas? The answer to that is almost certainly no, not in the world we've created. The question is, can we have a Christmas where the commercial aspects serve the meaning instead of overwhelming it? Where buying gifts is one expression of love among many, not the only one. Where we spend money because we want to, not because we feel we have to. Some people manage this. They set budgets and stick to them. They make homemade gifts alongside purchased ones. They focus on experiences over things. They give to charity as well as to family. They create their own traditions that aren't centered on consumption. But it requires intention. It requires resisting the constant pressure to do more, buy more, spend more. It requires saying no sometimes, even when that's uncomfortable. And here's the thing. This tension between sacred and commercial, between meaning and money, isn't going away. If anything, it's intensifying, because every year retailers depend more on Christmas. Every year the shopping season starts earlier. Every year the pressure to consume increases. So what do we do? How do we navigate this? How do we celebrate Christmas in a way that feels meaningful while living in a culture that wants to sell us meaning? I don't have a perfect answer. I don't think anyone does, but I think it starts with awareness, with recognizing the tension, with making conscious choices about what we want Christmas to be in our own lives, regardless of what the culture is telling us it should be. Because Christmas, as we've seen throughout this whole journey tonight, has always been what we make it. The Romans made it Saturnalia. The Norse made it a rule. The medieval Christians made it 12 days of feasting and fools. The Puritans tried to unmake it entirely. The Victorians remade it into a family celebration. Americans made Santa Claus and shopping malls. And you get to make it whatever you want, whatever feels meaningful, whatever brings you joy, smart, whatever connects you to the people you love. The commercial infrastructure will still be there. The advertisements will still bombard you. The shopping season will still start in October. But you get to choose how much of that you engage with, how much power you give it over your celebration. That's the real gift of Christmas. Maybe not the presents under the tree, but the freedom to define for yourself what matters, what's sacred, what's worth your time and your money and your attention. And now, as we near the end of our journey through Christmas history, there's one final transformation we need to explore. Because Christmas didn't stop evolving in the 20th century. It's still changing, still adapting, still spreading, and in the process, it's becoming something unprecedented. A truly global phenomenon, celebrated in countries that have no Christian tradition, by people of every faith, and no faith in ways that would be unrecognizable to anyone from the past. Christmas has gone global, and in that globalization, it's become something new again, something no one quite expected. Christmas Eve in Tokyo. Couples dressed in their finest clothes walk hand in hand through streets lit up with millions of LED lights. They're heading to restaurants for romantic dinners. Later, they'll exchange gifts. Maybe watch the illuminations at Tokyo Tower. Maybe spend the night at a hotel. This is how millions of Japanese people celebrate Christmas. Not with family, not in church, but as couples. Christmas in Japan is essentially Valentine's Day. And what are these couples eating for their romantic Christmas dinner? Turkey, ham, Christmas pudding. No, they're eating KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm not joking. In Japan, KFC for Christmas is so popular that people order their Christmas buckets of chicken weeks in advance. Some locations require reservations. On Christmas Day, KFC serves more than 10 times their usual daily customers. There are lines out the door. How did this happen? How did fried chicken from Kentucky become a Japanese Christmas tradition? Because Christmas, when it travels around the world, doesn't stay the same. It adapts, it transforms. It becomes something that makes sense to the people celebrating it, even if that means becoming completely unrecognizable to anyone who celebrates a traditional Christmas. And in that transformation, in that wild diversity of global Christmas celebrations, we learn something profound about what Christmas really is and what it can become. Let's start with Japan, because it's such a perfect example of Christmas going global and going weird in the best possible way. Christianity never really took root in Japan. Less than 2% of the population is Christian, so Christmas isn't a religious holiday there. It's not even an official holiday. Most people work on December 25th. But starting in the 1980s and accelerating through the 1990s and 2000s, Christmas became huge in Japan as a commercial and cultural phenomenon. The KFC thing started in 1974 with a brilliantly successful marketing campaign called Kurisumaswa Kentucky, or Kentucky for Christmas. The campaign positioned fried chicken as a Western Christmas tradition, which it's not, but most Japanese people didn't know that, and it worked beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Today, Japanese KFC's Christmas season accounts for about a third of their annual sales, a third from one day in the weeks leading up to it. But KFC is just one piece of Japanese Christmas. There's also the Christmas cake, a white sponge cake with strawberries and whipped cream bearing no resemblance to any traditional Western Christmas dessert. There are elaborate light displays in every shopping district. There's the Christmas market culture, imported from Germany but adapted with Japanese precision and aesthetics. And there's the romantic couple tradition, which probably came from how Christmas is often depicted in Western movies. Romantic, intimate, magical. Japanese culture, which has specific holidays for family obligations, saw Christmas as an opportunity to create a holiday just for romance. And that's what they did. Is this real Christmas? By what standard? It's not Christian. It's not even particularly Western anymore, but it's meaningful to the people celebrating it. It brings them joy. It's their version of light in the darkness, of creating something special in winter, of marking this time as different from ordinary time. Isn't that what Christmas has always been about? Let's travel to the Philippines. Here, Christmas is radically different from Japan. For one thing, the Philippines is the most Catholic country in Asia. About 80% of the population is Catholic, so Christmas is deeply religious, but it's also deeply Filipino. The Philippines has the longest Christmas season in the world. It starts in September. Yes, September, and runs through January. 4 months of Christmas. They call it the Burr months. September, October, November, December. In September, stores start playing Christmas music. In October, decorations go up. By November, the whole country is in full Christmas mode, and it doesn't end on December 25th. It goes all the way through to the first Sunday of January when they celebrate the Feast of the Three Kings. Why so long? Partly it's the commercial, extended shopping season, but partly it's cultural. Filipinos are separated from their families more than almost any other nationality. Millions work abroad as overseas workers, sending money home. The extended Christmas season gives them time to save money, make travel arrangements, and actually get home for the celebration. And when they do get home, the celebration is spectacular. There's Simbangabi, 9 days of pre-dawn masses leading up to Christmas. There's No Buena, the midnight feast after Christmas Eve Mass featuring lechon, roasted pig, ham, fruit salad, and dozens of other dishes. There's Parol, colorful star-shaped lanterns that light up every home and street. Filipino Christmas is about family reunion, about coming home, about being together. Religious observance is real and important, but it exists alongside this deep cultural emphasis on family connection. Again, is this an authentic Christmas? It's not European. It's not like Victorian England or medieval Germany, but it's intensely meaningful. It's what Christmas has become in this particular place for these particular people. Let's go to Ethiopia. Here, Christmas, called Ghana, is celebrated on January 7th, not December 25th, because the Ethiopian Orthodox Church uses the Julian calendar instead of the Gregorian calendar. The night before Ghana, people dress in traditional white clothing called Nutella. They attend an all-night church service that starts at 6 p.m. and goes until 3 a.m. They stand for the entire service. There are no seats in Ethiopian Orthodox churches. After the service, they go home and break their 43-day fast with a meal of Dora wet, spicy chicken stew and inera, the traditional Ethiopian flatbread. The next day, people play Ghana, a hockey-like game that's said to be what shepherds were playing when they heard about Jesus' birth. Teams compete in villages across the country. There's no Santa Claus, no Christmas trees, no stockings or gift exchanges. Ethiopian Christmas looks nothing like American or European Christmas, but it's Christmas nonetheless. It's their way of celebrating the birth of Christ, adapted to their culture, their climate, their traditions. Let's look at Australia. Here, Christmas falls in summer. December is hot, often over 100 degrees F. Snow is impossible. The whole winter wonderland aesthetic makes no sense. So, Australians adapted. They have Christmas barbecues on the beach. They eat cold seafood instead of hot turkey. They surf on Christmas morning. Santa Claus has been spotted wearing board shorts. There are carols by candlelight in parks instead of inside churches. There's cricket on TV all day. The Boxing Day Test match is a national tradition. Is this less real than a traditional cold weather Christmas? Why? Because it doesn't fit the Northern Hemisphere experience that became standardized. In Mexico, Christmas blends Catholic tradition with indigenous customs. There's La Sardis, 9 nights of processions reenacting Mary and Joseph's search for lodging in Bethlehem. Families go from house to house singing until they're finally led into one house for a party. There are piñatas shaped like stars representing the Star of Bethlehem. Children break them to release candy and fruit, symbolizing the blessings that come from faith. On No Buena Christmas Eve, families feast on tamales, pole, balao, and tomatoes. At midnight, they celebrate with fireworks. Not quiet, contemplative fireworks. Loud, explosive, everywhere fireworks. Christmas in Mexico sounds like a war zone at midnight. In Iceland, they don't have one. Santa Claus, they have 13. The Ula lads, each with their own personality and day they arrive. Spoon liquor arrives on December 12th. Bowl liquor on the 13th. Door slammer on the 19th. Each one is mischievous, sometimes helpful, always interesting. Children leave their shoes on windowsills for 13 nights before Christmas. Good children get small gifts. Bad children get rotting potatoes. There's also Jera, a giantess who lives in the mountains and comes down at Christmas to eat naughty children. And her pet, the mule cat, who eats people who didn't receive new clothes for Christmas. Icelandic Christmas is weird and wonderful and nothing like Christmas anywhere else. In India, where Christians are a tiny minority, about 2.3% of the population, Christmas is still widely celebrated in major cities. People decorate mango trees and banana trees instead of pine trees because, well, that's what grows there. They light small oil lamps instead of candles. They give gifts to the poor, echoing Christian teachings, but also Hindu and Sikh traditions of charity. And here's what's beautiful. In India, Christmas has become a time when people of different faiths come together. Hindu families visit Christian friends. Muslims participate in celebrations. Sikhs light up their homes. It's become a secular celebration of joy and connection that transcends religious boundaries. In China, where Christianity is a minor religion and Christmas is not a holiday at all, young people have adopted Christmas as a time for parties, gift-giving, and romance. Similar to Japan, but even more commercialized. Shopping malls have elaborate decorations. Restaurants offer special menus. Apple sales spike. Because the word for Christmas Eve, ping, sounds like the word for apple, pingo. So, Chinese people give each other apples on Christmas Eve, wrapped in cellophane, sometimes in decorative boxes. It's a tradition that's maybe 30 years old, based on a linguistic coincidence, but it's become real to millions of people. Do you see what's happening here? Christmas, as it spreads around the world, is being reinvented everywhere it goes. It's absorbing local traditions, adapting to local climates, responding to local needs and meanings. Some Christians are uncomfortable with this. They see it as dilution, as losing the true meaning of Christmas. They're not entirely wrong. When Christmas becomes about fried chicken and romance in Japan, or beach barbecues in Australia, or apple giving in China, it's certainly not about the nativity story anymore. But I think they're missing something important, because what's happening globally is exactly what's always happening with Christmas. It's always been a hybrid. It's always absorbed whatever culture it encounters. Roman Saturnalia, Norse rule, Germanic tree traditions, Victorian sentimentality, American commercialism. Christmas has never been pure. It's never been just one thing. It's always been a meeting point, a crossroads, a place where different traditions come together and create something new. The global spread of Christmas in the 20th and 21st centuries is just the latest chapter in this ongoing story of adaptation and transformation. And here's what I find most moving about global Christmas. Even when the specific traditions change dramatically, even when Christmas becomes unrecognizable from its origins, certain core themes persist everywhere. Christmas is about light in darkness. Whether that's candles in Europe, LED displays in Tokyo, or oil lamps in India, the symbolism remains. Everywhere, Christmas is about gathering with people you love. Whether that's family in the Philippines, couples in Japan, or friends of different faiths in India, connection is central everywhere. Christmas is about generosity. Whether that's charity to the poor, gifts to children, or food shared at a feast, giving matters. Everywhere, Christmas is about marking winter as special, as different, as a time to pause and celebrate. Even in Australia, where it's summer, even in Ethiopia, where it's January, even in Japan, where most people work that day, it's still marked as special. These themes, light, connection, generosity, marking time, these are universal. These are human. These transcend any particular religion or culture. And that's why Christmas of all holidays has become the most globally celebrated. Not because Christianity conquered the world, it didn't. Not because Western culture is superior, it's not. But because Christmas, in its flexibility, in its willingness to adapt and absorb and transform, has become a vehicle for expressing things that humans everywhere need to express. We all need light in darkness. We all need connection in isolation. We all need rituals that mark ordinary time as special. We all need permission to be generous, to celebrate, to feel hope. Christmas provides that in different forms, in different ways, adapted to different cultures and contexts, but providing that same essential human need. Is this the real Christmas? Is KFC eating couple-oriented Japanese Christmas as authentic as a Victorian English Christmas or medieval German Christmas or an early Christian observance in Rome? I think the answer is, they're all real. They're all authentic, because Christmas isn't a fixed thing that gets degraded as it spreads. Christmas is a living tradition that grows and changes and adapts, because that's what living traditions do. The Christmas in your home, the Christmas you celebrate with your family, with your traditions and your food and your music and your meaning, that's real Christmas. That's an authentic Christmas. Even if it looks nothing like anyone else's Christmas. Even if it would be unrecognizable to someone from the past, because Christmas belongs to everyone who celebrates it. Not to historians, not to religious authorities, not to tradition purists, to everyone who lights a candle or a lamp or a string of LEDs, to everyone who gathers with people they love, to everyone who gives what they can to others, to everyone who marks this time as special, as different, as a moment to pause and celebrate being alive. That's what Christmas is. That's what it's always been, and that's what it will continue to be in forms we can't even imagine yet, as it continues to spread and adapt and transform. We've come so far tonight, from ancient fires in the darkest night to LED displays in Tokyo, from Roman Saturnalia to Kentucky Fried Chicken, from Norse warriors to Filipino overseas workers flying home for the holidays, from medieval feasts to beach barbecues in Australia. And through all of it, through every transformation, every adaptation, every bizarre twist and unexpected turn, one thing remains constant: the human impulse to create light, to gather together, to be generous, to mark this darkest time as a time of hope. That impulse is older than Christianity, older than Rome, older than writing. It's as old as humanity itself, and it will continue long after we're gone. People will still gather in December. They'll still light lights. They'll still give gifts. They'll still tell stories. The specific forms will change. They always do. But that core impulse, that fundamental human need, will persist. Which brings us to one final question, one final reflection as we end this long journey through Christmas history. What does it all mean? What do we do with this knowledge? How do we celebrate Christmas now, knowing everything we know about where it came from and what it's become? That's what we need to talk about as we close this night together. So, here we are nearly 2.5 hours into this journey through Christmas history. We've traveled from prehistoric fires to Tokyo skyscrapers. We've met Roman revelers and Norse warriors, Puritan killjoys and Victorian sentimentalists, Turkish bishops and American cartoonists. And if you're still here with me, still listening as the night grows deeper, I want to thank you. Because what we've really been doing tonight isn't just learning history, we've been asking a deeper question. What does it mean to celebrate? What does it mean to create meaning in the darkness? What does it mean to be human? Let me tell you one more story, a personal one. To bring us home, December 2020. The first pandemic Christmas. Do you remember? Families couldn't gather. Churches were closed or limited. Office parties were canceled. The Christmas markets, the shopping mall, Santas, the school pageants, the caroling, all of it gone. Millions of people spent Christmas alone or in small, isolated groups, separated from the people they loved. It should have been the death of Christmas. If Christmas is about gathering, about parties, about crowds and communal celebration, then a pandemic should have killed it. But it didn't. Instead, something extraordinary happened. People adapted. They got creative. They found new ways to celebrate. Families held Zoom Christmas dinners, awkwardly trying to toast across screens. Friends did drive-by gift exchanges, pulling up to houses and leaving presents on doorsteps. Neighborhoods organized socially distant light displays where you could walk through and see decorations without entering anyone's home. Churches streamed services online with families watching together from their living rooms. Some people said it wasn't the same. They were right. It wasn't. But it was something. It was their attempt to keep Christmas alive, to maintain that thread of connection, to refuse to let the darkness, both literal and metaphorical, win. And you know what? That's what people have always done. That's what this whole history has been about. When the Romans lost their agricultural communities, they created stanelia to maintain connection. When Christianity needed to survive in pagan cultures, it adapted. When the Industrial Revolution tore apart traditional communities, Dickens reimagined Christmas as a family celebration. When commerce threatened to overwhelm meaning, people fought back by creating their own personal traditions. Christmas has survived everything history has thrown at it. Persecution, bans, commercialization, globalization, even a pandemic. Because at its core, Christmas isn't about any specific traditional practice. It's about the human refusal to surrender to darkness. It's about saying, no matter how cold it gets, we will light a fire. No matter how isolated we feel, we will reach out to each other. No matter how much we've lost, we will give what we can. No matter how dark the night, we will create light. That's what your ancestors did when they lit fires at the winter solstice, not knowing if the sun would return. That's what Romans did when they gave gifts during Santilia. That's what Norse warriors did when they burned rule logs for 12 days straight. That's what medieval peasants did when they feasted despite having almost nothing. That's what Puritan celebrants did when they secretly hung holly despite it being illegal. That's what Victorians did when they brought trees into their homes. And imagine Santa Claus bringing magic. That's what people around the world do now in 1,000 different ways. They refuse to give up. They refuse to let winter, real or metaphorical, be the final word. So what does Christmas mean now? What should it mean to you, knowing everything you know about its complicated, messy, beautiful history? I think it means whatever you need it to mean, whatever brings you comfort, whatever creates connection, whatever generates hope. Maybe for you, Christmas is deeply religious, about celebrating the birth of Christ, about going to church, about the sacred becoming incarnate in human form. That's beautiful. That's meaningful. That's been part of Christmas for 2,000 years. Maybe for you, Christmas is about family, about gathering everyone you love, about cooking traditional foods, about maintaining the rituals your parents and grandparents taught you. That's beautiful too. That's the Victorian gift to Christmas, and it's no less meaningful for being more recent. Maybe for you, Christmas is about generosity, about giving to those who have less, about volunteering, about remembering that we're all fellow passengers to the grave. As Dickens said, that impulse goes back to St. Nicholas, back to Roman gift-giving, back to the beginning. Maybe for you, Christmas is about joy, about lights and music and magic, about creating wonder for children, about believing even as an adult that the world can be more enchanted than it appears. That's the gift of Santa Claus, and it's a real gift. Maybe for you, Christmas is about rest, about finally stopping, finally pausing, finally giving yourself permission to not work, not produce, not achieve just for a moment. That's ancient too. That's the winter solstice gift. The reminder that rest is sacred, that stillness is holy, that you don't have to be productive every moment to deserve to exist. Or maybe, and this is okay too, Christmas is complicated for you. Maybe it brings up difficult memories. Maybe family gatherings are stressful. Maybe the commercial pressure is overwhelming. Maybe the darkness of winter isn't just metaphorical for you. Maybe you're genuinely struggling and all these celebrations feel hollow or painful or like they're happening to someone else. If that's you, I want you to hear this. You're not broken. You're not doing Christmas wrong. Sometimes the darkness is real. Sometimes winter is hard. Sometimes we can't generate light and joy on command, no matter how much the culture tells us we should. And that's okay, because Christmas, real Christmas, deep Christmas, isn't about forcing happiness. It's about acknowledging the darkness and choosing, if you have the strength, to light even the smallest candle. Maybe your candle this year is just getting through the day. Maybe it's reaching out to one person. Maybe it's being kind to yourself. Maybe it's allowing yourself to rest without guilt. That's enough. That's your Christmas. That's your light in the darkness. Because here's what I hope you take from this long journey tonight. Christmas isn't something that happens to you. It's not something you have to do correctly. It's not a test you can fail. Christmas is something you create, something you choose, something you define for yourself based on what you need, what you value, what brings you meaning. The Romans created their version. The Norse created theirs. The medieval Christians created theirs. The Victorians created theirs. The Japanese created theirs. And you get to create yours. You get to decide which traditions matter to you and which don't. You get to keep the parts that bring you joy and let go of the parts that bring you stress. You get to honor your ancestors' traditions or create entirely new ones. You get to celebrate with crowds or in solitude. You get to be religious or secular, traditional or innovative, simple or elaborate. You get to make Christmas your own. And in doing that, in making those choices, in creating your own light in your own way, you're participating in something that goes back to the very beginning of human civilization. You're doing what your ancestors did, refusing to let the darkness win. That's what Christmas has always been. That's what it will always be. Not a fixed set of traditions handed down from on high, but a living, evolving human practice of creating meaning, connection, light, and hope in the darkest time. The specific forms change, the names change, the practices change, but that core impulse, that defiant human insistence that we can make life beautiful even when it's hard, that we can find joy even in winter, that we can give even when we have little, that we can connect even when we feel alone, that never changes. That's eternal. That's universal. That's what makes us human. So as we come to the end of this night, as you prepare to go to sleep or continue with your day, wherever you are in the world, I want to leave you with this thought. Every time you light a candle or turn on Christmas lights, you're doing what humans have done for thousands of years. Every time you give a gift or share a meal, you're participating in something ancient. Every time you gather with people you love or reach out to someone who's alone, you're keeping a promise that goes back to the beginning. We will not let the darkness win. We will create light together. That's the real history of Christmas. Not the dates and the names and the specific traditions, though those are fascinating and I hope you've enjoyed learning about them, but the deeper history, the human history, the story of how we've always found ways to create meaning, to generate hope, to light fires in the darkness. And you're part of that story now. You're continuing it in your own way with your own traditions, making your own choices about what Christmas means and how you'll celebrate it. That makes you part of something bigger than yourself, something that stretches back thousands of years and will continue thousands of years into the future. You're part of the unbroken chain of humans who refuse to let winter be the end of the story. And that's beautiful. That's profound. That's worth celebrating. So whatever Christmas means to you, whatever form your celebration takes, whatever light you manage to create, whether it's a bonfire or a candle or just the faint glow of hope in your heart, know that it matters. Know that it's real. Know that you're part of this ancient human practice of defiance and joy and connection. Know that you're doing what your ancestors did, choosing light over darkness, connection over isolation, hope over despair. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything, from the deepest darkness before the winter solstice to the brightest lights on Main Street, from Roman Saturnalia to Japanese KFC, from Norse Ula logs to Victorian Christmas trees, from St. Nicholas to Santa Claus, from medieval feasts to pandemic Zoom calls, it's all been the same story. The same beautiful, messy human story of refusing to give up, of creating light, of choosing hope. That's Christmas. That's always been Christmas. That's what Christmas will always be. And now you know. Now you understand. Now you're equipped to create your own Christmas, whatever that means to you, carrying forward this ancient tradition in your own unique way. Thank you for staying with me through this long journey. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, creating your own light in your own way. I hope this story has given you something, maybe understanding, maybe perspective, maybe permission to celebrate however feels right to you. I hope it's made Christmas richer, deeper, more meaningful. And I hope wherever you are, whatever you're facing, you find moments of light this season, moments of connection, moments of hope, because that's what it's all about. That's what it's always been about. From the longest night to the returning sun, from ancient fires to modern lights, from all of us throughout history to all of us here now. May you find light in the darkness. May you find connection in isolation. May you find hope in winter. May you keep Christmas well in whatever way that means to you. This has been the real history of Christmas from pagan to present. Thank you for listening, and please stay tuned for more stories like this one. More journeys through history that help us understand who we are and where we come from. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, you are the light in someone's darkness. Just by being here, just by trying, just by refusing to give up. Good night, sleep well, and may your days ahead be filled with whatever light you view